This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Do you fancy a bit of culture? A little bit of culture. I had a very cultural day yesterday. I'll be waxing lyrical about Nye, which is currently on at the National Theatre in London, but is set to run for a week in Cardiff at the end of August. It's a production that's already been around a bit, starring Michael Sheen as Aneurin Bevan, and it just blew me away. So I expect many references to that, including one in just a moment. But I'd like to begin with what I suspect, of all the books that are quoted by people who've never read them, which do you think would come top of the list? A genuine question. I might even pause for long enough to let you answer it. How many people will have the same answer to this question as me? Of all the books that are quoted by people that have never read them, which book is quoted the most? Do you want to have a go at that? Do you want to have a little... It's not Sun Tzu, Andrew. Stop being shit. I mean, well, maybe it is, but that's certainly not. But which book in it? Yes, Bruce got it in one. Bruce has got there first. I was just going to pause. I was going to stay. Yeah, Katie's got there as well. Oh, actually, Andrew and Ian have given me a bit of pause there by mentioning the Bible. Well, yeah, all right. Very few people, apart from Donald Trump, have read the entire Bible. You know that Donald Trump has read the entire Bible, because when he was asked by some Christian evangelicals what his favourite part of the Bible was, he replied all of it, which is just an answer of such perfect idiocy that you almost have to give the old booby credit. But yes, I mean, it is now torn. It's not Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Richard. Everybody's read that, but we are now torn almost equally between the book that I consider to be the correct answer and the Bible, which I fully accept. Oh, all right, fiction. Oh, God, that's going to open up a can of worms. Forget I said fiction. All right? Okay. So, which novel? What is the novel most quoted by people who have never read it? And that's quite gratifying, actually. You've got an almost, if you remove the Bible from my inbox, then you have and then you get rid of Dave, who's joking around with a Roger Hargreaves reference to Mr. Bump. You've got an almost unanimous answer to the question, and the answer is 1984. If everybody who quotes 1984 had read 1984, then almost all of the people who quote 1984 on Twitter, for example, would stop quoting 1984, because it's not about what they think it's about. I almost hesitate to read you this bit, but when you notice public discourse lurching inexorably, and perhaps inevitably, into the sort of hatred that is now being directed at refugees, particularly the ones crossing the channel in small boats, you know that this is a trope. These are practices as old as the hills. Did you know, for example, that before the Second World War, Neville Chamberlain was raging in the House of Commons about how awful welfare claimants were? I told you I was going to reference Nye Bevan a lot today. That play is very fresh in my memory. You're going back to the 1930s. You got Neville Chamberlain on the Tory benches explaining that the country can't afford to support people on welfare, unemployed minors, for example, receiving far too much in state handouts. But it's to 1984 that I turn first. No, it's not How They Broke Britain, Mike. Everybody's read that, and everybody who has read it should be quoting it liberally. I hesitate to share this with you because, listen, I mean, I don't know why you feel the way you do about small boats, but I do know how much effort, and of course I don't know how you feel about it, but I do know how much effort has been put in to making you feel like this. And this is Winston Smith, the hero, if you like, of George Orwell's 1984, recounting a visit to the cinema on April the 4th of 1984. And I'm going to read you quite a bit of it, because 1984 is a warning. It is an alarm bell designed to make us understand what our future, what our shared future could hold if certain powers and certain forces are allowed to ride roughshod over what we hold dear. Last night, says Winston, to the flicks, all war films, One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise. Then you saw him through the helicopter gun sights. Then he was full of holes and the sea round him turned pink and he sank suddenly as though the holes had let in the water. Audience shouting with laughter when he sank. Then you saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it. There was a middle-aged woman, might have been a Jewess, sitting up in the bow with a little boy about 3 years old in her arms. Little boy screaming with fright and hiding his head between her breasts as if he was trying to burrow right into her, and the woman putting her arms around him and comforting him, although she was blue with fright herself. All the time covering him up as much as possible, as if the thought her arms could keep the bullets off him. If you're just tuning in, I'm not providing live coverage from Gaza. I'm reading something from 1984. Although, of course, because the focus of these hatreds can shift according to the interests of power and wealth, it wouldn't be a Jewess, would it, if I were reporting on Gaza? If he was trying to burrow right into her and the woman putting her arms around him and comforting him, although she was blue with fright herself, all the time covering him up as much as possible as if she thought her arms could keep the bullets off him. Then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among them. Terrific flash and the boat went all to matchwood. Then there was a wonderful shot of a child's arm going up, right up into the air. A helicopter with a camera in its nose must have followed it up, and there was a lot of applause from the party seats, but a woman down in the prole part of the house suddenly started kicking up a fuss and shouting they didn't ought to have showed it. Not in front of the kids. They didn't. It ain't right. Not in front of kids. It ain't, until the police turned her out, and I don't suppose anything happened to her. Nobody cares what the proles say. Typical prole reaction. Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. Go on, look me in the eye and tell me that we're not in the foothills of that kind of process. Look me in the eye and tell me that you can't think of half a dozen people in public life at the moment who have come pretty close to suggesting that we should blow these boats out of the water. In fact, you could probably name half a dozen people that have done it. Hop over to social media for 5 minutes and it will be there. It will be there. You'll find it. People calling for it. You might want to turn your radio off now if I'm describing you. If you're sitting in that cinema audience cheering these murders. Or think, I don't like this. I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to listen to this nonsense. It's ridiculous. I just want those boats to... Oh, it's me. Well, Orwell knew what he was talking about. Orwell knew what he was describing. And his great gift was his understanding of the universality. His great gift was his knowledge that it can happen any time, any place, anywhere. The martini, if you like, of historical hatreds. And here we are. Our public discourse now dedicated almost entirely to whipping up these kinds of hatred. Some columns in national newspapers are knocking at the door of what Orwell describes, although for now, I suppose, thankfully, they won't go that far. People do in private. A couple of texts coming in. I have colleagues already saying that we should shoot them when they land on the shores. We're not in the foothills, says Jill. We're already up the mountain. Yeah, well, maybe. And a few people even sharing names of public figures who you would argue have already gone there in propaganda terms, if not in policy terms. It is 12 minutes after 10. I mentioned that, and now I'm going to mention Anira Bevan, because I saw a play about him last night, and my favourite quote of his, which didn't make the cut, is this: how can wealth persuade poverty to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power? Here lies the whole art of conservative politics in the 20th century. Spoiler alert, and the 21st. And of course, the timeless answer to that question is simple. Give them something to hate. Give them something to get angry about. Give them something to chomp on furiously as the business of hoarding wealth continues, as the business of inequality accelerates, as the business of blaming people with the least for the unhappinesses of people with something is as old as the hills. And there it is. I mean, I did two things in absolutely stark relief that are... Steve tells me at his golf club, if this were to happen now, if those boats were sunk at sea, 80% of his golf club would be over the moon. And he's not exaggerating. I mean, maybe if it happened and the footage were broadcast, this is, of course, why Israel won't let journalists into Gaza. Maybe if the footage were broadcast, public opinion would shift inexorably. But I don't know. I don't know. Orwell knew what he was talking about. I just want to leave that percolating, fermenting in your mind, because it's not what we're going to talk about today. I've just wanted to read it out for some time, and something about the play that I saw last night and the timeless tropes. It was probably Neville Chamberlain wanging on about, I mean, before the welfare state even existed, you've got Neville Chamberlain claiming that unemployed people are getting too much, they're undeserving poor, and you sort of think, it's so bloody transparent. But how do they do it? Answer, they own the newspapers. And, of course, when social media looked briefly as if it might offer some sort of antidote to this historical manipulation, what happened? The billionaires moved in. Musk bought Twitter, turned it into a place where that kind of commentary from George Orwell is a wet dream for many of the people now paying Elon Musk and being paid by Elon Musk for the privilege of spreading their bile, hatred and viciousness on social media directly into your sitting room, your phone, your social media. So none of that is at the forefront of my mind today. And glancing at the clock, I notice it's already 10:15. So I will do what I just said I was going to do, leave that to ferment and start with the phone in proper from a completely different perspective in a moment. Because here's the thing, right? We're going to talk about small boats, but we're going to talk about what caused them. And we're going to reflect upon what Emmanuel Macron told us yesterday. And the strange fact that all the people responsible, if you think it is a massive problem, all the people responsible for it are the people now screaming loudest about it without taking any responsibility whatsoever for the fact that they did it to you. They did it to you. I voted for Brexit, and now I'm going to vote for reform because of all the small boats. What if Brexit caused the small boats? Then what happens to your brain? Then what happens to your conscience? Then what happens to your sense of self, your political convictions? What if you caused it? What if the people who caused Brexit caused the small boats crisis and still refuse to say sorry? Bussing themselves down to Dover, rubbing their thighs with their Fisher-Price binoculars as they focus upon these people. And look, don't get me wrong, the photographs are deliberately provocative. Well, not deliberately, they are inarguably provocative. Nobody likes to see that sort of sense, that sense of invasion is easily fertilized, easily watered by people. But there it is. What if they caused it? And it's unlikely, well, certainly one who was on with Nick 10 minutes ago isn't going to be able to ring in and tell us, but they are unlikely to explain to us how they deal with the fact that they caused the problem that they're now furious about. They did it. I don't know whether or not we will talk about how the rest of us squared this circle. But you can find out after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 is the time. Some days it feels like I'm determined to conduct a phone-in show that actively discourages people from phoning in. So to continue that theme, I'm now going to play you some French, which I probably won't be able to understand. I definitely won't be able to understand all of it. But and that's part of the problem that we're facing together today. Here is Emmanuel Macron speaking yesterday in French.
D'abord, il faut comprendre que depuis le Brexit, et je le dis aussi avec honnêteté parce que je sais que ce n'est pas votre cas, Monsieur le Premier ministre, mais beaucoup de gens dans votre pays ont expliqué que le Brexit permettrait de lutter plus efficacement contre l'immigration clandestine. Simplement, c'est depuis le Brexit que le Royaume-Uni n'a plus aucun accord migratoire avec l'Union européenne. En effet, il n'existe donc, pour les candidats à la traversée, ni voie d'admission légale alternative, ni dispositif de réadmission à l'issue d'une traversée. Et la situation actuelle crée en réalité une incitation à réaliser la traversée. C'est donc l'exact inverse de ce qu'avaient proposé, plutôt promis, les Brexiteurs.
I asked my colleague Connor to translate that into English for you. I asked him to do it in the voice of René from Hello Hello, but amazingly he refused. So unfortunately you're going to have to endure his... Now, but pay attention, because this was said in the UK by a world leader with whom we are in the process of coming to an agreement about something that lots of people who told you to vote for Brexit profess to be very, very furious, very, very cross, very, very concerned. Here is the man we're going to sort of rely on in many ways to help fix parts of this perceived problem, describing in terms that are utterly irrefutable how the problem came about.
D'abord, il faut comprendre que depuis le Brexit,
it is important to understand that since Brexit, and I say this with honesty because I know this does not apply to you personally, Mr. Prime Minister, but many people in your country claim that Brexit would allow for more effective action against illegal immigration. In fact, since Brexit, the United Kingdom no longer has any migration agreement with the European Union. As a result, for those attempting the crossing, there is neither an alternative legal route for admission nor any readmission mechanism in place after a crossing. The current situation, in reality, creates an incentive to attempt the crossing. This is therefore exactly the opposite of what the Brexit supporters had promised.
So how do we do this? You and me. And I would loosely say people who kind of knew that this was going to happen, maybe not the finer detail of the immigration policy. Most people probably hadn't read the Dublin Agreement, let alone understood the consequences of abandoning it. And look, for the record, it wasn't implemented very often, but it was an option that was open to UK governments to send people from coming here irregularly from European Union countries straight back to European Union countries. So Emmanuel Macron there says, this is therefore exactly the opposite of what the Brexit supporters had promised. I don't know whether or not we've passed the point where contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned holds true, where it feels important. I do not know whether we've passed that point. I choose for the moment to focus on the people that sold the lie. So does Emmanuel Macron. It is important to understand that since Brexit, many people in your country claimed that Brexit would allow for more effective action against illegal immigration. In fact, it's got worse. As a result, for those attempting the crossing, there is neither an alternative legal route for admission nor any readmission mechanism in place after a crossing. This is facts. If you are in the business of whipping up hatred of refugees and you were also in the business of whipping up support for Brexit, I don't think you can acknowledge these facts. And that's the problem I want to look at today. I don't know what the rest of us do. I genuinely don't know how we squared this circle. Part of me feels we've already surrendered. The negligible proportion, the negligible percentage of people in this country who've come here via this route and the huge percentage of them that turn out to have valid asylum claims, that argument seems to me to be over. You have to legislate for the world that you inhabit, not the world that you want to inhabit, although Nye Bevan would probably disagree. God rest his soul. So that bit of the argument seems to be over. How do we do this? How do you ever have a sensible and honest conversation about so-called small boats without mentioning that the people trying to make political capital out of them are the people who caused the problem? That's my question for you. It's not the easiest question I've ever asked, but it might be one of the most important politically because, of course, the people who make the most noise about the small boats were the people who sold you Brexit. And somehow at the moment, this country, this population is falling for it on a scale that even George Orwell would perhaps be surprised by. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I mean, because Keir Starmer doesn't want to talk about Brexit. Emmanuel Macron mentions it and in a single moment pulls apart 99% of the rhetoric and propaganda surrounding the whole small boats issue. I don't know whether or not you can have conversations like this and pretend that Brexit isn't the reason, pretend that Brexit isn't the root cause. What is it? What is it? I mean, how do you even explain it? How do you explain it to a Frenchman? Oh, yes, the people who caused the small boats crisis are the people complaining the loudest about it. What's happened to us? Well, I think we know, because we're back to that Anira Bevan quote, aren't we? We're back to that simple observation. How can wealth persuade poverty to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power? If you're, I mean, there's two pages in the Daily Telegraph today. One tells the news story about someone paying £7.4 million for a handbag. I'll say that again, and you can do the Lady Bracknell line, all right? £7.4 million for a handbag. Altogether now, a handbag! And then you flip a few pages further along and you've got an opinion piece describing a wealth tax as a moral abomination. That's the same paper, not just the same country. It's the same flipping paper put together by the same human hands. Someone's got £7.4 million to spend on a handbag, and someone else is describing a wealth tax as a moral abomination. How do they get away with that? And Irene Bevan will tell you. How to persuade poverty to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power. And how are they doing the next stage of it? How are they drawing attention away from the hoarding of wealth, from the epic inequality, from the crippling cost of living? Look, over there at the small boats, just don't mention the fact that the problem was caused by the people who were shouting the loudest about the small boats. 25 minutes after 10 is the time. Not sure I've got a question yet, but a couple of people have rung in already, so let's see what they've got to say. Matt's in Glastonbury. No pressure, Matt. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, James. I've got an awful lot to say, which is, I guess, not unusual, but I wanted to address a few things. So firstly, I wanted to talk about the Brexit question. The question that you posited a moment ago was, excuse me, in response to Macron, how has Brexit increased the number of small boats crossings? And I can give a legislative answer to that without opinion or without emotion. And that comes back to the Schengen Agreement, which you will remember. When we were part of the EU, the majority of signatories to the EU signed up to the Schengen Agreement. We didn't. And part of the Schengen Agreement was that if you are a signatory, it is your duty to make sure that people that enter your borders under that agreement do not spill over into those that haven't signed that agreement. Do we agree?
Well, look, the numbers today are 30 or 40 times higher than what they were before Brexit. So
that's right.
I don't know where you're going with this, but...
Well, I shall tell you.
Well, if you would, but don't ask me any questions. Just crack on with your point, because we're going to run out of time. And it has nothing to do with Schengen. But you tell me why it does. Let me just remind you of what the numbers are. So... 45,774 in 2022, 1,843 in 2019. So Schengen was working. From our point of view.
It was from our point of view, yes.
Okay, carry on.
That's the point. Then we left the EU,
yes,
which meant that we are no longer, or rather the countries still in the EU are no longer bound by the Schengen Agreement to stop people travelling across their borders. Only people that are signatories to the Schengen Agreement. I think
we're getting a bit bogged down in this because
you asked for an example, and that's an example.
It's not though. It's not. It's got nothing to do with the small boats, because one of the other reasons why the small boats are happening is because we shut down all the routes by which people were climbing into the back of the lorries and coming that way, and that was while we were still in the European Union and while the Schengen signatories were still subject to the Schengen signatories. So indulge me briefly on the question that I'm almost asking but haven't quite yet. How do we deal with the fact that the people angriest about the small boats are the people that caused the crisis?
How do we deal with? Well, we can come back to the idea. Well, a problem that we face in our social media world is one of binary arguments.
Yes.
I spoke to your producer a moment ago, and I wanted to.
We're going to run out of time. How do we, as a population, not necessarily as a media, because I think that battle is lost, but how do we converse about the small boats crisis in the full knowledge that the people who caused it are the people who are making the most political capital out of it and professing to be angriest?
Well, James, it's because they understand the idea that it is, or they've proven that it works as a binary agreement, that they keep people in tow. They allow them to. Well, if you convince somebody to hate something else,
yes,
rather than the thing that you're doing, look at Boris Johnson, for heaven's sake.
Yes,
the man was coining it from day one.
Yes, but how do we undo this? How do we unravel this knot? So I don't know if I mean, imagine someone listening to this programme, voted for Brexit, thinks the sun shines out of Nigel Farage's backside, and hates the small boats, and is pretty close with each passing month to being like the cinema audience in 1984 with which we began the programme. How do you unravel that?
You teach them to speak again, or teach them to converse again from school. Well, yes, but you can't say it can't be done, James. If you say that, you've already lost the argument.
I agree with you, and I think one argument has been lost. We're talking about this as if it is the biggest problem facing the country, as if it is the biggest crisis facing these islands, and it measurably and obviously isn't. But if enough people believe that it is, then the political impetus is defined, isn't it? It's determined. But you can't start. I mean, I agree with you. Long term, you start in school, but now, as in today, as in callers who tend to ring other programmes on this radio station and go unchallenged with their ignorance, How do you address that ignorance? I voted for precisely what is happening now. They can't say out loud. Yes. So what can you say to them?
Well, you can't, James. The argument's lost. But we can. It's no good trying to find an answer when an answer doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, look at us both, Matt. We've just swapped positions. We're not arguing. We just swapped positions. You've just gone from saying you can't say that. That means you've given up, and then then we've swapped positions, and now I'm saying to you, you've given up.
I'm not saying we're giving up, James.
You just said we're giving up, Matt.
But it's not worth the argument.
Well, then what are we here for?
We're here to try and prove a point, I think, to each other.
But no, we're not. We're on the bloody team that's trying to persuade all the people that caused this and still don't. How do you? There it is. Perfect. Absolutely perfect first half an hour of the programme. The scene is set. Matt and I know what happened. The people who are angriest about the so-called small boats caused it. It is their fault. It is on them. The people who sold it to them, the numbers are frankly extraordinary. Remember, we formally left the EU. That's the point at which this is measured from. 1,843 people making that journey in 2019. So far, and then if you go to the last measurable full year, or you choose 2022, 45,774. How can people who voted to reduce immigration in the Brexit referendum look at these numbers, not just the big numbers, but the small boat numbers, and think, I know who I'm going to vote for. I'm going to vote for the people who sold it to me. 03456060973. And what the hell can the rest of us do if not, as both Matt and I have somewhat reluctantly and unexpectedly suggested, if not just give up and go home? Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:34. Fiction, written in 1948. Last night to the flicks, all war films. One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise, then you saw him through the helicopter's gun sights. Then he was full of holes and the sea around him turned pink. Real life. 2025. Mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the B words for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. That woman who's become something of a cause célèbre among public figures, among politicians and journalists who are paid to influence public discourse, Lucy Conley, currently in jail. How would she respond, do you think, if she'd been sitting in that cinema audience to the footage that we're describing? If she'd been shown footage of people burning in hotels? If she'd been shown treacherous government and politicians also burn? You see, it's a cigarette paper. Or maybe it isn't. You tell me why. But as the small boats are used to whip up that sort of hatred, to whip up that sort of anger by the people who caused it, because Emmanuel Macron has quite rightly pointed out that Brexit robbed us of almost every meaningful legal measure we had to return people, if that's what keeps you awake at night. How do people who care about the truth, care about facts, care about evidence, care about detail, care about human beings perhaps, care about each other? I don't know how you stop people ending up like that cinema audience, but how do you continue the conversation? Keir Starmer has decided not to mention it at all. I don't know whether he would have been dismayed or relieved that Emmanuel Macron chose to. I don't think, and this isn't self-aggrandising, it's the opposite actually, it's quite depressing. I don't think there'll be many other corners of the media pointing this out. The fact that he gave the speech in French is unhelpful because it generally won't get played out on bulletins. It's in the news, don't get me wrong. The Telegraph has got a front page going absolutely bananas about it, but the Telegraph goes absolutely bananas every day. They're the boy who cried bananas. So even if they turn out to be telling the truth, no one's going to notice because everything they do is bananas. How do we do it? How do you have a conversation in a country that is being primed to care passionately about something caused by the people that are doing the priming? 0345 6060 973. It's a weird question, right? And the answers are going to be quite, I think, grim. I'll give you an example. You use the tactics employed in 1984. You repeat the message over and over and over again. You drill it home. You distract. You diffuse. You defer. You use the tools of mass indoctrination to deprogram. Great. So you need to sign up Viscount Rothermere, Rupert Murdoch and the rest of them to actually start acting against the interests of wealth and in the interests of the population. Don't hold your breath, mate. It ain't going to happen. 10:37 is the time. Manuel is in Hendon. Manuel, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Confused today, but oddly in quite a good mood.
I think we all are.
Carry on.
I think we all are. To be honest with you, I am not British by birth. I was born in Portugal, moved here 15 years ago. And I've witnessed all this evolving from a little idea, a little question to everyone to become one of the behemoths and that it is now.
Yes.
So for me, as Portuguese, I can tell in 2016 when I left my house after the referendum, when I walked into the tube was one of the worst feelings of my life. And I think I can speak for every European that is here that felt like a knife was being, stabbed in our backs. And,
not Giselle Stewart. There you go. There's one who felt fantastic. But you carry on. I think yours was the more common experience.
The thing is, I still also remember talking to my taxi driver and go, yeah, we voted for this, but not because of you. And that's the thing that resonates. So when you say compassion for the conned, that's exactly it. That's how I feel it. That's how I see it. You vilify your neighbors. You make sure that your country is the best. And we're doing everything right. Everyone is doing everything wrong, and you're better or worse because we're bad because of that. And that's how you get the idea that now you have that. It's growing, it's brewing, and it's growing. Even though everything went to where we are now.
Yes. Well, we've moved on from hating you, which must be something of a relief, to hating people coming over in small boats.
Yes, which is also which is incredible because people blame immigration on the lack of control from the government, and like you say, so they voted to surrender what control we had. Yes, and you remember there's a gentleman called Boris Johnson that immediately after Brexit he lowered the threshold from salaries to the point system and so on, and. Now,
because privately they knew we would be hemorrhaging workers, and publicly they insisted that they didn't want people coming here. I mean, in fact, that's point two of the madness that we're currently inhabiting. Point one, of course, is that the fury surrounding small boats is being generated and fomented by the people that caused it, by encouraging everyone to vote for Brexit. Most obviously, in my world, the media figures who still haven't acknowledged their error or said sorry. And then point two, of course, is that privately everybody in politics knows that we need to encourage workers to come here, and publicly we need to be ranting about how awful it is. So is there any... And I don't want to end this hour by thinking there's no point doing this, but we've got a Prime Minister who knows how nuts Brexit is, who won't say anything about it. We have to wait until the French Prime Minister turns up to tell us an obvious, if slightly uncomfortable, truth. And the political momentum in this country is flowing behind Nigel Farage at the moment, the man who, until very recently, was trying to claim all the credit for the Brexit that has caused the small boats crisis that he's now claiming he's the only man can solve. Where does reality get a look in, Manuel?
Well, it's all due to semantics, and also, this is not a British issue. It's an European issue. Yes. I don't know if you follow the news in Portugal. The second biggest party is an extreme right wing that is very, very similar to Reform. And they're very empowered now. And if you ask me, there's no solutions. It's all about who shouts higher, who bashes their hand higher on the table. And it creates this matter over substance. There's nothing. It's a lemon without the juice. That's how we say it in Portugal.
I like that line a lot. I might nick that. Although there's less juice, of course, in lemons on this side of Europe for now. The heat wave might change that. We're talking about politicians who are nudging the population ever closer to becoming that cinema audience in 1984.
Yes, because empathy, as you've seen coming from the US, right? Empathy is now the new hate word.
Yeah.
If you've got empathy, then you're weak. I remember a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was a migrant boat that flipped over the coast in Greece, and there was this little child that they took a picture, which is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in my life. And this was around 2015. I had just become a father, and you inevitably make you relate to such a horrible picture. Yeah. And I remember at the time people saying that's fake. And how can you, in your right, with your right mind, and consider yourself a good person.
And he'd fled
if
Syria.
You don't have
fled
empathy.
Syria, hadn't he? Where there wasn't even an argument. There wasn't even an argument that he should have stayed there and I don't know, joined the army or something. Alan Kurdi. And it looked for a while as if that was going to change the nature of discourse, but Orwell would have known that it couldn't. Orwell would have known that it wouldn't.
The issue is we're either 8 or we're 80 at this moment. So you're either with us or against us. Either you say stop the boats, or you are a person that just wants everyone to come in. And it's not about that. It's about a middle ground. It's about talking. It's about conversation.
Well,
it's about having empathy and having an intellect. Because that's what I think it's one of the things that is most absent nowadays. It's a lack of intellect. You think about
and now we become condescending. You see, they're very well equipped. These people that sold Brexit and are now selling refugee hatred, despite the fact that they caused the small boats that they're using. They're very well equipped because now they call you condescending. Oh, you've just questioned the intellect of these people. I mean, you're right to, and it is either innate cruelty or a profound lack of intelligence and understanding. But you say that out loud, and it's condescending, mate.
Yeah, I understand. It is, but you have to also understand that I'm an immigrant. Period. So I pay my taxes. I live my life. I'm part of the culture. I love this country. I see it as my own. My kids are brought up here, but you constantly see this hatred growing, and hatred has no rational ground.
No. The hatred of the ordinary people has no rational ground. Manuel, I'm glad you stayed. The hatred, the people generating the hatred, have the most rational ground of all. It's the most magnificent way of ring fencing their hoarded wealth and their privilege. How do you protect a disgustingly unequal country where your cost of living problems are not being caused by people in dinghies? They're being caused by people getting richer and richer and richer every day by doing nothing. And if you want to know how accurate that analysis is, just look at the hysterical reactions from the people who control public discourse in this country to the very notion, the vaguest suggestion of something called a wealth tax. It's a moral abomination, writes somebody in the Daily Telegraph about 8 pages after a story about somebody else paying £7.4 million for. Lady Bracknell impersonators unite. A handbag? So what do? I'm enjoying this conversation. I really am, because sometimes it feels as if we live in a parallel universe where we're all denying reality. Emmanuel Macron turns up for a few days, reminds us what reality looks like. But I don't know how you marry those two universes. You marry reality with the unreality that Brexit has created in this country, and that the people who sold Brexit continue to foment, most recently by using the small boats, quotes, crisis, end quotes, that they caused. It's extraordinary, isn't it? No wonder that lad who was on with Nick nearly an hour ago has to turn off when I come on, because this is the mirror that they can't bear to look in. You did what? You voted for it. Why? Immigration. And how's that got rocketed? Whose fault is that? Is it Gary Lineker's? Steve Khan's? James O'Brien's.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I mean, we're all gaslit, whether we know it or not. Every single one of us. I'd love to conduct some sort of thought experiment where opinions can thrive without influence. If you manage to create what would it be? A kind of petri dish of news where everything is evidence-based and opinion is not allowed. BBC used to be like that, but it's not really anymore. Have a look at how the BBC is reporting on this government and compare it to how it reported on the last government. And I'm thinking of the web pages, not the actual bulletins. But every time one of their broadcasters puts pen to paper, it ends up being, so you announce a new scheme, this is unlikely to work, or this is going to have big problems, or Farage is setting the political pace. It's all opinion, and it's never unbiased opinion. Now, is there such a thing as unbiased opinion? No, that would be a fact. If you could actually create somebody whose worldview was influenced entirely by facts, not even by feelings. Because, I mean, listen, I say to you, I give you the Nye Bevan quote, which I think if I ever get a tattoo, this will be what I get tattooed. It'd be a bit of a rubbish tattoo, actually, unless I used a funky font. How can wealth persuade poverty to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power? How can wealth, And I've also been thinking about class again as a consequence of this play I saw last night. I think we got close to actually understanding what class is in this country when we were talking about the wealth tax. If you need to work to live, you're working class. If you don't, you're not. That's the only distinction that matters. That's wealth and labour, with a small L. How can wealth persuade poverty? And you don't even need to use the word poverty. I prefer the word labour. How can wealth, i.e. people who don't need to work, persuade labour, i.e. people who do, to use our political freedom to look after their interests? And one of the key ways is to go look over there. There's some people on a boat. Get angry about that and give us a day off. It's extraordinary. And it was caused by Brexit. So how will the conversation unfold? Is it time to do a Keir Starmer and just not mention the cause of this thing that he's trying to fix that was caused by the people who are exaggerating, embellishing, inflating the size of the problem? 0345 6060 973. I genuinely don't know. And I'm no clearer now than I was at 10 o'clock. But I won't stop trying. Alec, and I won't stop asking you to help me. Alec is in Cardiff. Alec, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. How's it going? You well?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Good stuff. It's the one thing which I feel is just not picked up at all, really, is because, obviously in the newspapers and what have you, is we always talk about the pull factors, like why people come into the United Kingdom, what they want to benefit from, free housing, free mobile phones, 5-star hotels and what have you. Yes. Yet no one ever really talks about the push factors. I mean, no one talks about the dire straits these countries are in. Invariably, we've been involved in wars in these countries in the past 2 decades.
I think that matters. I mean, I know that you're right, and just for the record, the picture you paint, I know you know this, but the picture you paint of 5-star hotels and free this, free that. I had a caller, I can't remember where it was the other day, who was a foster carer, who was inflating the nonsense that all refugees get given free mobile phones because he cares for unaccompanied children, and they do get given a phone. I mean, on what possible planet would an unaccompanied child not have some means of contact with the system that is currently processing them? Just extraordinary. But I know you know this. It's not true, that picture. But I don't know that...
of course, yeah.
I know you know that. But, this is LBC, mate. You should hear some of the callers on other shows. But the push factor, I don't know that it matters. That's why I started the show with the Orwell quote today.
But I think with the push factor, I guess we're tied with neoliberalism. So we, the people invariably on the right, they believe in free markets, lack of regulation.
No, they don't. They think they do because that's what they've been told to say at dinner parties or on social media, but they don't believe in the free market or lack of regulation.
The people at the top, the people with the money,
yes.
like your Rupert Murdochs, they want as little regulation as possible, and they use their papers to peddle out these lies. And at the same time, they want to control immigration. So if you have a neoliberal society, by definition, you can't really control the movement of labour across
You're absolutely
borders.
right, but that's the point, isn't it? They don't particularly want to control immigration. They were supremely comfortable with the fact that it ballooned after Brexit because Brexit got them what they wanted, which was, as Rupert Murdoch said, when he walks into Downing Street, they do what he says. When he goes to Brussels, no one pays the blindest bit of attention to him. So he got what he wanted. He get a government in power that's even more dedicated to the protection of wealth, like a Boris Johnson or a Nigel Farage, and it's job done. It's mission accomplished, isn't it?
It is, and it's just as you say before. It's I think a good example you gave the other week was the winter fuel allowance for the elderly. There's that 35,000 cut-off point, and there's you want to go up to someone in the street, and you earn less than £35,000, and you need to process this and think that this is okay, that they're going to get this support, whereas you don't get any support from the state for your winter fuel allowance. You're all voting for it. You're all.
So how does the conversation need to change?
I think people just need to be a bit more honest with each other, have these discussions, and free speech and what have you on the internet. You've got your typical.
But you don't have free speech on the internet. Elon Musk has completely skewed Twitter. His AI bot this week has been praising Hitler, and
there are lots of very
talking up the Holocaust.
Indeed, yes, there are lots of very prominent right-wing. On Facebook, on Twitter, who peddle lie after lie, and they always conflate issues. But you can't challenge them. You used to be able to challenge them, but you can't anymore because the algorithm has been doctored to either silence you or kind of push you to the fringes. Absolutely, and I think conversations that we're having now on shows like yours should be trying to promote that and push back on that.
There's only one of me.
Indeed, I'm sure
might be the biggest show in town.
We need some left-wing blog.
Even without, well, I mean, there you go. You say it, and I can nod along and sigh and giggle at the same time. More left-wing blog posts. That's the problem, isn't it? People think I exaggerate when I do this, and then I ask them to make a list. People say, it's so biased in this country. Everything's so woke. I say, make a list of the people paid for their opinions with a big audience, a big platform, who you think lean to the left. I'll wait. Gary Lineker, no, he's not paid for his opinions. And he's been essentially kind of chased off Twitter as well. Anyone else? Genuinely anyone else? A few Guardian writers, okay? But respectfully, they're usually too busy arguing about transgender people and Jeremy Corbyn with each other to bother landing any punches on wealth, if you like, or on privilege, or on inequality. What? Who's on the list? Yeah, well, the reason why you don't have many people in the media who espouse those sort of views is because it's not very popular commercially. It doesn't work very commercial. Okay, then why have I got the biggest show? It's a very arrogant question, but someone's got to ask it. And why are the people who sold you Brexit now pretending that they're passionately concerned about... You know what they'll be doing next, don't you? We should look after our own. Yeah, that's look after our own unless they're poor, unless they're ill, unless they are struggling to make ends meet, unless they have got 3 children, unless they can't afford to buy a house and are very unhappy. So we look after our own, but I can't tell you exactly who I mean. So the homeless, do you look after the homeless? You know, Lineker actually took refugees repeatedly into his home. Didn't change any of the hatred directed at him from the kind of people who go, all right, then why don't you bring some refugees into your home then? It doesn't matter. But anyway, carry on with your list. I'm waiting. Bob Villan, writes Lee. I suppose if you're going to be cheeky, then they briefly managed to secure themselves a big platform. But what do you know about their opinions outside of the Middle East, outside of matters Middle Eastern? You see what I mean? And now make a list of people on the right. Now make a list of people who you might loosely describe as being right-wing, or as being pro-Brexit, or as being anti-refugee, or as being pretty close to whipping up the audience in George Orwell's, in Winston Smith's cinema. Now make that list. You see? We'll be here till Sheila gets here at 1 o'clock. That list is so long. Pretty much every person in this country paid for their political opinions. I used to say paid to think about politics, but that's not true anymore. Don't need to think about it to say, we don't want anyone here. Let's look after our own. Let's look after our own. I think we should look after our own. So you just make those 2 lists and then tell me about bias. Davey points out we'd be here till Nick Abbott comes on, James, if we were to start making a list of people who are pro-Brexit, encouraging of racism, anti-refugee, all of those things, anti-diversity. Make that list in the media and then tell me again, come back and talk to me about bias. Come back and talk to me about 2-tier justice or whatever it is you're bleating on about this year. It's absolutely incredible. So you can despair at the state of social media. You can despair at the state of social media. It's really only a reflection of our oligarch-owned media. Why do you think Fox News never really got an equivalent in this country in terms of the scale of the audience that it commands? The answer is because the Daily Mail was there years ago. Years ago. Commoditising that brand of hatred, that style of division and othering. They wrote the book. Rothermere's granddad was writing about how wonderful Hitler was in the 1930s. Where's Fox News going to get a look in the 20th century or the 21st century if the Daily Mail was going down that road 100 years ago? But anyway, I'll leave you to make the list. And you can't have BBC journalists on it, of course, because they are not allowed to tell you what their political opinions are, which doesn't stop the Daily Mail deciding that they're absolutely awful, unless, of course, it's Andrew Neil, in which case they'll give him a column. You think I should have written a book about this, shouldn't I? It's coming up to 11 o'clock. My apologies to Josh and to Phil and to Marita, to Rick and to others. I probably should have taken more calls that hour, but it turns out I had quite a lot to get off my chest. As indeed I do in the next hour, because it's the same story. Except we're not talking about refugees now, we're talking about people in receipt of state benefits. On this occasion, people who are poorly, or not, which is, of course, the narrative of so-called sick note culture. play I saw last night, I will remind you, contained Neville Chamberlain in contemporaneous quotes railing against welfare claimants in a country that didn't even have a welfare state. And now it's the turn of people with anxiety and depression. Looking forward to your calls.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. There was a story doing the rounds yesterday, inevitably, because the small boats aren't going to do quite enough distracting from the real sources and causes of inequality in this country. We're going to have to find some other people to attack as well. And so far, Keir Starmer's Labour government seems to be dancing to the tune of the people that lead these attacks rather more enthusiastically than some of us would like. There was a story around yesterday about how you can make more on benefits than you do through work. And I thought, crikey, that's bad. I'll have a read of that. And I got halfway through the story and it said, this theoretical claimant. So it's a think tank that was founded by, wait for it, Ian Duncan Smith and a bloke called Tim Montgomery, who has sort of moved around various orbits of British political commentary. And I think, and I hope, I don't know if this counts as libel, I think he's ended up in Reform. He was one of those people who originally said Brexit had nothing to do with immigration. But hey-ho, here he is now, polishing Nigel Farage's shoes. But the think tank they founded concluded yesterday that you can actually claim so much, you claim all the benefits, you can end up earning more than a person in work. And you sort of look at a story like that and think, crikey, that's bad. And then you wonder where the case studies are, and it turns out there aren't any. And even in the actual reporting, they have to say this theoretical claimant. Very simply, the boxes you would have to tick, the things that you would have to prove, the situation that you would have to be in to be eligible for all of the things that they collated and collected together would be close to impossible. But not impossible. There may well be a tiny, tiny, tiny number of people that fall into that category and deserve all the support that they're getting. But you won't be reading that in the right-wing newspapers anytime soon. You'll just be reading the headline about theoretical people enjoying theoretical incomes based on entirely theoretical calculations designed to give you a bit of time off from hating refugees so that you can hate people on sickness and disability benefits instead. I mean, let's be grateful, shall we? Thank goodness for those of us who don't hate refugees can give them a few hours off from being the focus of the 2-minute hate, where we can turn our attention instead to people on sickness and disability. But it also ignored, of course, the impact that savings have. Do you know what else? Do you know what the phrase no recourse to public funds means? How many times do you hear these people mentioning no recourse to public funds? You come here from somewhere else, your access to the system that the rest of us take for granted is incredibly limited. The money you have to pay simply to use the NHS. It's extraordinary how the reality is completely at odds with the narrative. And I'm afraid that many senior members of the Labour government seem to have given up on making these arguments and making these points. And who can blame them when you're still too busy making that list of right-wing voices in public discourse in this country to balance against the, 2, 3, 1 voice that you can think of from the left? So what are we talking about next? I have 2 questions hinged upon another front page, this one containing the word sick note. I thought that we may have seen the end of this. But there is a problem here. Let's be absolutely clear. There has been an explosion in claims for certain conditions since the pandemic. But for me, the most important words in that sentence are not claims and explosion. They are since and pandemic. Something shifted. Look at how many people have gone bananas since lockdown, or did go bananas during lockdown. The people in your family, people in your Facebook group who think that vaccines involved, I don't know, phone masts were going to be directing us all to go and eat sprouts or something. I mean, the absolute level of people who've gone bananas is a matter of national importance. So it's hardly surprising if people can go bananas in terms of what they believe, that some people will get ill in terms of their mental health. You're going to believe that a vaccine is designed to create population control or some such, then obviously you are acknowledging the existence of a country, a society in which mental strain has become intolerable. Let me read you something from Chesterfield Reform UK, okay? This is something they've posted. Your water is laced with fluoride, which lowers IQ and calcifies the pineal gland. Your sky is filled with geoengineered clouds spraying aluminium, barium and strontium, proven to damage soil and human health. This is Farage's army. Your air is tainted, your soil is degraded, and your homes are filled with EMF radiation from Wi-Fi. That's where the phrase tinfoil hat comes from. 5G, smart meters and Bluetooth devices that never switch off. You think the 15-minute city is about climate, it's about control. You think ULEZ is about pollution, it's about digital fencing. I mean, the nuttiness on display there from people who are, supremely confident to display their mental fragility, if you like, in a public space is off the scale. But there are two kinds of mental fragility. That there is the mental fragility that leads people to believe things that are ridiculous and bonkers and bananas. And then there is a sort of mental fragility that actually makes you ill. And there has been an explosion of both. It's almost preferable to believe that fluoride will make your hair fall out, or that 15-minute cities, i.e. communities where everything will be within a 15-minute walk, are a secret conspiracy. What would you rather? Would you rather be depressed, or would you rather believe this bilge? Hand on heart, knowing quite a lot about depression, but never, thankfully, having suffered it myself, I'd rather believe this bilge. You gave me a straight choice. We had some sort of Faustian pact. You can either believe that ULEZ is about digital fencing and electric cars are remote-controlled, trackable, hackable prison pods. The goal is not sustainability. The goal is compliance. This stuff sells well on social media. And you know what Farage has done with vetting for reform? You won't believe me when I tell you. So I'm not actually going to tell you yet. All I will do, I said to Henry Riley, and he can confirm this, on Monday, I said, I'm not quite sure there's much point digging out all the examples of reform councillors and candidates being racist or homophobic or bigoted anymore, because I think they're going to own it soon. Looking at the lie of the land, the way the newspapers and the usual suspects are getting behind Farage, I think they're going to own the bigotry soon. I think they're going to stop being embarrassed by it. I said that on Monday, and within hours, I don't want to give anything away. No spoilers. No spoilers. But if you gave me a simple choice between genuine, because people do genuinely believe it. We're going to mention that woman from my jewellery service again, aren't we? They genuinely and deeply believe it. I'd rather be bonkers than depressed. I think I would. I think it would be very difficult to do a phone-in on that. Don't you? I think it would be very, very... I think it would be too hard to watch the sensitivity correctly. But I do see a link between people who went bonkers during lockdown and people who got very, very ill. Because they are both forms of mental fragility, mental frailty. I don't know, actually. I'm fascinated now by that question. I wish I wouldn't do this. I never thought about that before. Would you rather believe that... we are lurching towards, here you go, your children are being sexualised in school under the banner of inclusivity and diversity. Oh, my children have been to school. They haven't been, none of these things have been done to them. You are monitored, scored, tracked and categorised without consent. This is not safety, it is digital tyranny. I don't know, the more I read it, no, you could never say I'd rather be depressed, can you? Because being depressed is bloody horrible. Why do you think people, trigger warning, why do you think people take their own lives? So mental suffering becomes unbearable. Or their physical suffering sometimes becomes unbearable. And the idea that... Anyway, that's why I'd rather be signing up for this nonsense and this bilge than actually genuinely depressed or suffering from crippling anxiety. Kemi Badenoch, I think, has read the writing on the wall here, because she's now saying, I think, and again, I apologise if I've misremembered this, she's now saying that you shouldn't be able to get signed or sit with depression or anxiety. Because she's probably not realised this, because she does seem to be a bear of very little brain. But if you create a system that is built upon the presumption that people are swinging the lead or lying, what happens to the people who aren't? So I read today, GPs will be told to stop issuing millions of sick notes that sign people off work and instead send them to job coaches or the gym. And my first thought, what happens if they're sick? What happens if they're sick? Wes Streeting, and this is the bit that's true. We simply can't afford to keep writing people off, he says, unless you raise taxes on an epic scale. Do you know what the Tredegar health policy was when Nye-Bevan? I told you I was going to be obsessing about Nye-Bevan for a while. Very simply, this small community in Wales, this small mining community in Wales, thanks largely to the efforts of Nye-Bevan, saw all the working people in the community pay into a fund that provided healthcare for everybody. Now, historically at the time, and the BMA were passionately opposed to the NHS, it's quite a lesson from history. Historically at the time, if you paid into healthcare or some form of health insurance, it only benefited you. So when you hear people like Farage talking about why we must move to a health insurance-based policy, this is what they want. It would only benefit the people who could afford to pay for it. What they did in Tredegar was create a health set up, a health system, a health service, that the people who paid into it were paying for the healthcare for everybody. Women generally didn't work back then. Children certainly wouldn't have been able to pay health insurance. Do you know that people had operations without anaesthetic because they had to find the money for the anaesthetic themselves? It's a bit like what would happen in a country with a health insurance system. Some countries, not all, where you didn't actually have health insurance. And that's what the NHS was. It was built on that idea that everyone who can pays into it, but everybody gets to benefit from it. And that is what it is supposed to do. But Wes Streeting is right. There comes a point where there is not enough money going into it to fund all the money being spent within it. So how does a system that seems to be designed to diminish sick note culture, which is a horrible phrase, how does it handle people who are sick? So here's the question I've got for you. And it's going to be a tricky one. And I'm going to need your help with it. And I worry, even as I frame the question in my mind, that I'm being gaslit again. And I've fallen a little bit too far into the notion that this is a problem that needs to be fixed. How do you tell the difference? All right? So here's the person you always hear about on radio phone-ins who shouldn't be claiming at all. Or the person that Ian Duncan Smith has not actually discovered, but has managed to establish the theoretical existence of in the context of welfare claimants. How do you tell the difference between them, the lead swinger or the Mickey taker of tabloid law, L-O-R-E, and the person who is incapable at the moment of leaving their house or of going to work? How do you tell the difference? 0345 6060 973. I'd also like to talk about therapy, because I know that if you are suffering from crippling anxiety or if you are deeply depressed, then your best chance of long-term recovery is talking therapy, and it isn't available to you, and unless you've got £100 a pop to spare on a private provision. You can get some of it from the NHS, but nowhere near enough. That's, again, another problem. If you were to provide the talking therapy that is needed, you'd have to, in the short term, spend a ton of money in order to save a lot more money in the long term. But I don't see any suggestions that they're going to do that. You have to be careful of letting journalese influence your idea of what a policy actually does. But the idea of helping people write CVs instead of helping them overcome the anxiety that is preventing them from working is, to me, extraordinary. The most common reasons for long-term sickness are mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, and then the musculoskeletal disorders such as back pain. I mean, short of making people run 100 yards with a rabid dog behind them, I don't know how you'd tell the difference between someone swinging the lead on the physical side of things. But here are two people. One of them is Ian Duncan Smith's fantasy figure, fantasy benefits claimant, who isn't actually in need of any help at all, but is pretending to be in order to live a life of luxury on flat-screen televisions and tenant super. And here is a person, here's someone you know, here's you, here's a real person with absolutely terrible anxiety. Two questions. How do you tell the difference? And what do you do with the second person to help them? What help do they actually need? What help do you actually need? I don't know if we can do another hour on how wonderful therapy is, because I suspect I'm boring you rigid, and I wish I wasn't, because it is the single most amazing discovery I've made in my adult life. And that includes Ferrero Rocher ice creams. So how do you tell the difference? And what would actually help? What would actually help somebody genuinely, currently unable to work through depression and or anxiety? 0345 6060 973. It's 11:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Sometimes I dismiss an idea because I think we've done it to death, but then I look at some of the messages coming into the studio and I think maybe we haven't done it enough. How hard is it to get... Let's do that as well, okay? Then maybe the question of how do you tell the difference is a little bit ambitious, because you're going to suggest creeping up behind people and shouting boo at the top of your voice. And if they have a nervous breakdown, then you know they're telling the truth about their mental health. And if they don't have a nervous breakdown, then you know that they're not. But it's a valid question rhetorically. How do you tell the difference? Why don't you take a moment out of your morning to tell everybody how easy or hard it is to get signed off work with depression or anxiety? Not with back pain, not with cancer, not with obvious and visible problems, but with depression or anxiety. Just tell me how easy it is. 0345 6060 973, because that seems to me to be part of the conversation that is missing. So whichever side of the desk you're on, how easy is it? If I wanted to get signed off now, and listen, if we hit 12 o'clock today and I'm thinking, God, that sounds quite easy, I will absolutely put my hands up and say so. If I wanted now, as of now, to get signed off with anxiety and depression, whether I had it or not, how easy would it be? 0345 6060 973. Dale's in Edinburgh. Dale, what would you like to say?
This is very relevant because yesterday I used a word in front of a friend of mine and he walked away, and that's neurodivergent. I'm an ex-soldier. I have a diagnosis of PTSD. But the real weird one, after I got my PTSD diagnosis, is I was diagnosed with autism and dyslexia. I think you've spoken about that about me before, the army giving me my voice.
Yes.
So in later life, when I tried to work as hard as possible after I left the army, because that's what the army teaches you, I just failed, kept failing, kept dropping. And as to your question, how long does it take? It takes over 10 years, James, for me. It wasn't actually until I moved to Scotland that I got off of the DLA, the money that they just throw at you.
Yeah.
And then I started to get more treatment up in Scotland than I was getting in England.
A different health.
And now most of my therapy is holistic. It's more military-style thing, wild camping, rock climbing. It sounds weird to be talking about these things.
It doesn't, though, you see. I'm getting so many calls like yours at the moment where people are telling me stuff that's true and working, and they feel that they need to apologise and qualify it. I had two yesterday. I can't remember the exact context. Someone will remind me in a moment on my inbox. But I know it sounds...
How scared I am, James, to use the neurodivergent.
Why did your friend walk away?
Because I'm in that environment, James, of soldiers. Okay, and soldiers, I don't want to get into their personal political views, but buzzwords, woke words... You start using them and they just look at you in a different light. And I got that yesterday. It's one of the reasons why when you spoke this morning, I thought I've got to phone in about this, because it hit me yesterday.
Well, words change, don't they? So most obviously in recent years, woke, I suppose, has moved from meaning one thing to meaning something quite different and confusing. Diversity and neurodivergent, which is, of course, a form of mental diversity. And you think that's now become, or has become in some circles, that's become an invitation to roll your eyes and accuse someone of lying or exaggerating. Am I understanding you correctly?
60, James.
Huh?
I'm nearly 60, and getting a late diagnosis of autism, dyslexia, isn't really what you want. It just gives you enough. It makes you think of your life and going back over your life and thinking, all those mistakes I made, all those things where people have a go at you about the things that you do wrong, like at work.
Yes. Now
you know why it went all wrong. Why I joined the army. No one was ever going to employ me if I didn't have a voice and I couldn't write. Okay, it was only the army that could employ me.
So everybody listening to this, or most people listening to this, will be doing what they do with immigration, though. They'll be saying to themselves, oh, no, I don't mean him. He clearly deserves it. Whether the support is there or not is moot. The question today is, does he deserve it? Is he a deserving neurodivergent? Is he a deserving... there's a piece in the Telegraph today saying that not all the poor are deserving. You need this idea there in order to attack the people who need help, but you don't want to give it to them. So I don't know if this is this might be an awful question, and if it is, then you're the last person I'll ask it to. How do we tell the difference for the benefit of someone like that between you and Ian Duncan Smith's theoretical benefits claimant?
I don't want to get angry, James.
No, well, don't.
Ian Duncan Smith makes me angry.
All right.
Okay, this whole entire 15 years.
Yeah.
Everything from 2006, 2008, when I started to go down, all coincides with austerity, 14 years of Conservative government, COVID, the war, everything. And you find out later on that all that stuff that is building up inside you was always there. No one saw it. And then now you've got people basically... If I go to my local autism group, I can't stay there because all the people in there are younger than me, and you feel like you're taking their money and their service away from them, who need it more than you think need it more than you. So I'm denying myself stuff. I'm denying myself the treatment that I need that's out there, that should be out there for me. It's there, but I'm too scared to take it because I'm too embarrassed to do it because of my age and my experience.
Yeah, thank you. And be nice to yourself, Del, eh?
Rock climbing, James.
Yes, yeah. Well, I don't know if I'll be joining you anytime soon.
I have arthritis as well, and it's really good for you. Rock climbing and arthritis.
But you sound like a man who deserves a bit of self-love, not just a bit more kindness from the society that you've served and risked your life for.
And that's the roughy tufty soldier for you.
That is the roughy tufty soldier. I kind of know that, but don't forget, you're not the person that walks away at the mention of neurodivergence. You are the person who understands the need of a bit of self-care. And it sounds, I mean, you're getting there, right? If I've listened correctly.
I've got plenty of people around me that understand what I'm going through, and I've also got plenty of people who are not interested. They haven't got the time, James. There's another thing that you don't talk about.
Go on.
The paperwork, the crossing of the I's and the dotting of the T's. There's my dyslexia. It's no time for you anymore. Hardly any time for you anymore. They can't put aside. My last thing I'll say to you, James, in 2006 when I was in combat stress, they stopped hugging. They wouldn't hug you. They wouldn't touch you. You weren't allowed to touch.
I didn't know that.
Soldiers need hugs. Remember that.
Well, that's 2 T-shirts you've given us now. Ian Duncan Smith makes me angry. And then soldiers need hugs.
Yeah, soldiers need hugs. They don't need therapy, they need hugs.
Well, they do need therapy, but they also it's not either or, God forbid, but they also need hugs. And I don't yet know the way into the conversation about therapy, except for me perhaps to invite you to tell your story. Not you, Del, you've told yours. But the role that therapy plays, because I know about the role that it plays in dealing with the weird personalities that we develop in order to survive hideous boarding schools, but that's not world tiniest violin territory. I'm doing what I tell other people off for. That, you know, everybody's trauma is trauma. It might not look big in the sort of top 10 of traumas, but if it has traumatized you, then it's trauma. So I know how therapy works on people like me, but I don't know how it works on anxiety and depression. And I would quite like to know a bit more about it. I'd like to know how hard it is to get signed off with these conditions and what works and how. Presumably the only answer to that question is therapy, and how therapy works. Teresa is in Coventry. Teresa, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I actually have been down this route. I was 30 years working as a teacher. Finally, my job made me very ill. I reported fraud that was happening within the section I was working in, and I got bullied. I was a whistleblower. I got bullied relentlessly to the point where one day I went into work and decided I couldn't go in anymore, and I walked out.
See, that's trauma. That's trauma, and other people will think, well, it's not as if she went to war, or it's not as if she sort of, got caught up in it, but it was trauma, and it rendered you a different person, a person that couldn't go to work. I've boxed you into quite a small period of time, unfortunately, Teresa. So if you could, how hard was it for you to get signed off? Or how easy, of course? How easy was it?
Okay, well, I was very fortunate. I had a lady doctor who was very, very sympathetic. and she did sign me off. It was really pointless sending me into work because I would get panic attacks.
Right.
So I couldn't work. It was fairly obvious I couldn't work. So she signed me off, but she couldn't provide me with any support therapy apart from antidepressants. And I ended up on such high levels that friends said I was like a zombie. I lost my short-term memory. I couldn't hold proper conversations. I was an avid reader. I couldn't read anymore because if I tried to read, by the time I got into the third or fourth sentence, I'd already forgotten what I read. It was just horrific. 3 years down the line, I finally was given early retirement, and I was able to use a chunk of the money that I was given as part of my early pension settlement to pay for therapy. Because you've asked, how do people get out?
Yes.
I actually paid, and at the time it was a phenomenal amount of money every month for cognitive behavioural therapy, which was given to me by a wonderful psychologist, clinical psychologist. And it was work with her that finally made me.
How long did it take?
10 years.
What, 10 years of treatment?
No, it took me 10 years from when I was...
No, I know. How long did how much therapy?
I was in therapy for about 3 years.
And you could feel improvements how soon?
It was very slow. I began to realise that...
This is the problem. Well, not the problem.
Yeah,
it's still wonderful. But in terms of you being ready to go back to work, because you'd already retired, it's hard to put a date on it. But there it is. I mean, how does it work, actually? It's a question that's worth asking as well. Because the massive majority of people listening to this programme, unlike Teresa, have had no experience of anxiety, stress or depression on a medical scale. Oh, therapy works. It's a glib throwaway line. We're also falling into the trap of thinking that all therapy is good. You know, there are bad practitioners out there, and sometimes you're unlucky. The match doesn't work. How does it work? 0345 60973. And how easy is it to get signed off? Dominic Ellis is here with your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11. I was telling you yesterday about this increasing thing I've got whereby I want to know what happens in other countries. So insular, aren't we? I don't know whether it is a consequence of geographical insularity or whether there is something peculiar to this country. Oh, that was it. We were talking about slowness of infrastructure projects, wasn't it? The fact that we're 3, 4, 5 years slower on average than America or Australia on delivering big infrastructure projects. I wanted to know what was peculiar to this country, because you can't measure these things without comparisons. So this is from James. I mean, it's very... it stopped me in my tracks a bit, and obviously I've got no way of checking it, but... I've also got no reason to doubt it. James, in Sweden, he writes, you go to the doctors for depression and anxiety and you see 3 professionals that day. Really? The average return to work is 2 weeks. In this country, it's 6 months. I mean, the help that you would get on day 1, day 2, day 3 seems to me to be absolutely crucial. And how many of us would wait until things had become truly unbearable before we even presented at the doctors? And how many, of course, would never dream of presenting at the doctors because they thought it was a sign of weakness? Why do you think suicide levels among men are so high in this country? So horribly, horribly, heartbreakingly high? Because we are conditioned not to ask for help. We are conditioned not to ask for help. I don't know how you would feel as someone who was just on the brink of either asking for help or going down the worst possible route, the worst imaginable route. I don't know how you would feel if you were hearing on your radio today or reading in your newspaper about a crackdown on a sick note epidemic among people with anxiety and depression. What impact do you think that might have on you? If it was you, forget about Ian Duncan Smith's theoretical benefit claimant. All right? If it was you, let's say you're a man, and like Dell, you kind of struggle with the idea of vulnerability or weakness. You're not necessarily someone who's done military service like Dell has, but trauma is trauma. And you are struggling, really bloody struggling, not just feeling a bit blue, but really struggling. I don't know if I can get out of bed. I don't know if I can leave the house. That kind of struggling. Can't tell anyone. It's another line in Aneurin Bevan in Nye at the National Theatre. I told you it had stayed with me when he never spoke to his wife, Jenny Lee, who's also an absolute titan of British politics. He never spoke to Jenny Lee about the miscarriage of a baby. And he told his friend, played by Jason Hughes, by the way, who's absolutely magnificent, he told his friend that he couldn't be weak in front of his wife. Now, this is a man of his generation, but, crikey, there are men like that around, aren't there? I used to be one, I think. You can't be weak in front of my wife. So what do? You carry this misery, this pain yourself. You carry it alone. And we wonder why suicide rates among men are so high. So if you're one of those men teetering between finding somehow whatever it is you need to ask for help, to acknowledge your pain, your vulnerability, or, God forbid, going down the other route and doing the worst thing that nobody would ever want you to do in a billion years, but you can't see any other option, how does the narrative of this conversation affect you? Does it make you more likely to go to the doctors and ask for help by becoming part of the sick note epidemic? Seems unlikely, doesn't it? Susan's in Bromley. Susan, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. I'm very nervous.
It's only me.
I've worked in HR for 20 years, and I've seen a real change of people with mental health problems. 20 years ago, we would provide employee assistance programs for 6 weeks. They would be picked up by the NHS. They'd come back to work within 3 months.
Really?
Yeah. Within 3 months, every 6 months.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, within 3 to 6 months. It's very unusual to have someone off with mental health illness longer than 6 months. Now, that 6 weeks EAP support drops off. They don't get support. They tend to get worse. They stop engaging with us. And in the end, invariably, they get dismissed. And it really saddens me because I don't think these people would have been dismissed 20 years ago.
Well, I know...
Very few people would have been dismissed.
Do we know why? I mean, is it... good Lord, all roads lead to austerity at the moment, Susan, and even I begin to worry that it might be a bit too pat, a bit too easy. But we're talking about cuts, are we, probably?
I think so, we are. And I think we're not responding quickly enough to mental health support. I mean, people with physical problems are always on waiting lists as well.
True.
But they're still engaged with their employers, so they've still managed to stay in employment. But I think people with mental health problems just tend to fall, and I think they stop going to their doctors because also we stop getting fit notes. So that's another problem. They're not letting their doctor, no one's checking on them. Yeah, I remember, I'm older than you, and I remember a time, sorry about that.
That's all right.
My television just comes on on its own. It's a bit of a weird thing.
Is it? It's not a poltergeist, is it, Susan?
No, it just worried me because it comes on.
You didn't sit on the remote, did you, by any chance?
No,
is there a bloke over the road? Is there someone over the road who's got the same model as television of you and they're using their remote control to haunt you?
No, at all.
Go on. I've distracted you now. The GP is part of the issue that we're discussing.
Well, I think the GPs have got too many. I mean, I was astonished to find out my GP practice got 12,000 patients. I think, how can you keep track on people if you've got 12,000 patients? I just think you haven't got that anymore. But also, I think the GPs assume... I mean, I managed to contact someone's brother, this was a few years ago, and their brother went round and found out that they hadn't. And GP said, I thought they were okay because they weren't coming back to see me.
Right.
But sometimes people don't have those sort of relationships with family members that can support them.
It's so bizarre. I'm so glad you were listening today because I hadn't even thought that things might have been better in the past. On the one hand, you've got people who think that it's all a wonderful roller coaster where there's nothing wrong with you at all, but you can sign on and get everything you dreamed of and a free flipping unicorn and all of that malarkey. And then on the other, you've got the picture you paint, which is obviously the truth, which is people slipping through cracks, people not being noticed, people not getting help, and then everybody else getting angry about the cost of that problem, which is fixable, that the rest of society has to pay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And something else I wanted to add.
Please.
I was born with a physical disability. I went to a special school. I went to a college for disabled students. And I've been working for 43 years. So I've had a good life. I'm still working now. And but I would not swap places for someone with anxiety or depression. Or I would maybe for an hour, because I'd like to know what it's like to be able to walk. To walk normally and run and jump. And all these things are going to go to my grave that I won't know. But I would not swap places. That is, but to me, mental health is far more disabling. There's a complete lack of empathy. I mean, I struggle with managers. And they say, well, you don't look depressed to me. No one would ever say, you don't look disabled to me, because, well, I do.
Yes.
No one would ever say it. But there's a complete lack of empathy and understanding.
You are... I hope this isn't inappropriate, Susan. You're a beautiful, beautiful person.
Oh, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. You've just hit me from about 5 different angles with your kindness and your decency and your humour as well. That's saying I wouldn't mind swapping places for an hour just so I'd know what it was like to dance around and jump up and down and stuff. That I don't know why that moved me so much, Susan, but it did. It really did. And the idea that you would just think deeply enough to say I wouldn't swap places with someone who can't see the light. I just wouldn't.
Yes, yeah. I mean, one thing I think disability does teach you is empathy, unfortunately. It does teach you empathy. But and that's the only thing it does give you. I mean, take away the blue badge and the benefits, but
seriously, I don't know what you were nervous about. You could do my holiday cover with your eyes shut.
Oh, bless you.
No, bless you. I needed that call. I didn't even know I needed it until you made it. You have a wonderful weekend, won't you?
Thank you very much, and you too.
You too, honestly. There it is. And you know, Susan can say it with a resonance I can't. You know, I can sit here and say, what would I rather? Would I rather be this Reform UK person who thinks that fluoride and ULEZ are whatever it is? Would I rather believe that bonkers stuff, or would I rather be anxious or depressed? Well, I'd rather believe the bonkers stuff. But Susan can sit there after a lifetime of disability, which has clearly not held her back from happiness and fulfilment, and say, would I swap with someone who was depressed or anxious? No, I wouldn't. And then throw in that beautiful one-liner about, well, maybe for an hour. And of course, we're back to the central problem with all of these conversations, which is the same with immigration. And you may not realise it until we point it out to each other, but it's, I don't mean you. I don't mean you. I mean them over there, the ones that Ian Duncan Smith's telling me about, the ones that Daily Mail are telling me about, you know, the ones I hear about on the radio when someone rings in to dob in their sister-in-law. They're the ones that... So how do you do it then? How do you have a system? How do you tell the difference? Is a slightly brutal question, but also the question of how do you look after the people who need help if you're building a system based on the presumption that nobody does? It's coming up to 11:44. Scott's in Red Hill. Scott, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good to speak to you again.
Likewise.
I just wanted to speak from my perspective. I'm a Samaritan. I'm a volunteer with the Samaritans as a listener.
Gosh, thank you.
So I hear this on a regular basis, as do all my fantastic volunteers. We're overwhelmed. You know, there's never an hour of the day where we don't have a waiting list. And many of these are going through all different types of, you know, mental health traumas or backgrounds or whatever stresses they're going with, and they're not getting the help they need. And the problem is that they either are too scared to go and get help.
Yeah.
They don't know how to address it. Like most people, they phone us and say, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And
I said, well, just take your time. You know, that you obviously just have to be very empathetic. And it's unbelievable how much comes off their chest, and they've been holding this burden on their shoulders for so long. And they're desperate. When I hear stories like this that people might be taking the mick, even if there is, it is the minutiae of this country, the minutiae. And it just infuriates me almost to tears because I feel so desperate.
Well, this is the elephant in the room, actually. It is the fact that if this is a bona fide explosion, and I, like you, think that it is, and all of the people on the front line, like you, tell me that it is, then when Wes Streeting says we simply can't afford to keep writing people off is the phrase that he uses. And there will be, definitely. If we've learned anything today, we can help people get better and help people get into work. But if the conversation is framed like this, it's going to make people less likely to ring people like you, let alone present at the doctors and detail the depression and the suffering that they're enduring.
And I tell you what I've noticed is there's a pattern. A lot of the callers that we get have said, I'm waiting for an appointment. My appointment's in 6 weeks' time, and that's with the GP. Then you talk to those who've put themselves up for the talking therapies, which is what you automatically get recommended by the GP.
Of course.
And that waiting list is huge, depending on which part of the country you are.
That's what you do. You know, that's right. There you go. If you've got a latter-day Nye-Bevan, bring in a wealth tax, spend it all on talking therapies. Just pick off one problem at a time. Talking therapies, because there has been an explosion of illness, not an explosion of fake claims, not an explosion of lead swinging or lies. Look, it exists. Don't think for a moment that it doesn't. But like Scott says, it's going to be a minuscule proportion of the overall numbers, and just do that, deliver it. We probably need to talk a little more about why and how these talking cures work. It is 11:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where one bit missing from the conversation, perhaps, and I could have a go at this, but I'd rather you did, is how do you sell therapy, talking cures, which I don't think you're going to be able to nibble at the edges of this epidemic of depression, stress and anxiety that the NHS is not really equipped to deal with, without really, really revolutionising access to talking cures, not work coaches and CV help, but talking cures, genuine therapy. How would you sell it to a sceptic? And I mean an open-minded sceptic. I don't mean the kind of person who most obviously needs therapy and thinks that it's a waste of time. I used to be one of those people. I categorically used to be one of the people that would laugh in the face of therapy because I'm fine. I got beaten at school. It didn't do me any harm. But then events, dear boy, events happen. How would you sell it to a skeptic? And part of that will involve you perhaps describing your recovery from the kind of anxiety and depression that prevented you from working, and you therefore becoming somebody who could go back to work. I'd like to, I don't know if we're going to have time because I've got something quite important to do in the next hour. I've sat down with Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. She's just completed a 3-year term, which has been renewed for another 3 years. And one of the great things we can do on this radio station that we can't do on other media, except perhaps podcasts, is sit down and have really long conversations that aren't sort of 2-minute packages that get bundled up for the news. So I think, as things stand, I'm going to play you the entire, and it's not far shy of half an hour, and we cover an awful lot of ground, as you would expect. Her latest report effectively accuses myriad companies, and not just arms companies, but companies that you are quite possibly a customer of being complicit in genocide in Gaza. And, it certainly made me sit up and take notice. So I'm minded to play you the whole thing from 12:30. Perhaps you might alert anyone that you think could be interested in that. But I'd also like I've got a choice here. Either we go down the therapy route, or we build half an hour of much more light-hearted phone-in around a woman I saw at Waterloo Station earlier today. So when it's really, really hot, we allow ourselves to do 1 or 2 phone-ins about who's got the worst job in the really, really hot weather. When I tell you about the woman I saw at Waterloo Station today, you are going to struggle to beat me, but I'm going to build up a little bit of tension, if I may. Speaking of tension, I mentioned earlier that Henry Riley would be able to vouch for the fact that I said something to you on Monday, which became true mere moments later.
You did. Yes. What was it again?
I said to you, we're going to stop doing social media stuff about reform candidates on the racism and the bigotry and all that sort. Because I said to you, I think they're going to start owning it. Yeah. And they're going to start not being embarrassed or ashamed by it. Farage, of course, is nothing if not entirely inconsistent. And so having claimed that we're going to have really rigorous vetting and we've got loads of... What happened about an hour and a half after I said that to you?
Yeah, they've changed the vetting rules, and it seems like from many cases, from much reporting, they've been watered down in some cases. And certainly if you sort of open social media, you do see a myriad of accusations levied at reform candidates, reform councillors. If you look at the class of 25, James, which
we should explain why. Because if there are people who've previously been turned down and now being told they can reapply with a chance of becoming candidates, we should have a look at what the vetting system that is now being watered down has delivered with the current crop of 2025.
Exactly, yes. So this is before it was watered down. Yeah. This is some of the class of 2025. There's, as far as I can see, I've worked out there's 11 councillors that were elected on the 1st of May that have either been suspended or have had to resign. I won't go through the full list because time is limited. But firstly, you've got Donna Edmonds from Shropshire, who, after being elected, has decided she wants to join one of the new parties, which I think we've spoken about. You've got Restore.
Yes, Recalibrate.
No, that's not one yet.
Okay.
But you've got Restore,
Reevaluate.
Not yet.
Okay.
You've got Reclaim, but she wants to join Restore, which is Rupert Lowe, or Advance UK, which is Ben Habib. She hasn't made up her mind yet.
Is Susan Hall still in one of those, or has she left it yet?
Susan Hall is still in Restore Britain, although she's under pressure to leave Restore Britain from some Conservatives.
She's still a Conservative as well.
She's still a Conservative.
On the GLA.
On the GLA.
And that was deporting people who are here perfectly legally, party, or not?
Yes, they want net... not quite how they phrase it, minus net zero, but they want net negative is how they phrase it. Net negative migration and the death penalty, and there's a few other sort of policies that aren't quite in the Conservative manifesto. You've got Tony Hewitt, I think, is my favourite. I'll tell you about him in a moment, but you've got Andrew Kilburn, who was elected to Durham County Council. 9 days later, he had to resign his seat because he forgot that he actually worked for the council.
Easy mistake to make.
Because you can't stand if you actually work for the council.
That's a shame, because I think if Farage becomes Prime Minister, he was going to be Secretary of State for Defence.
He might have been in for a big role. He could come back if he leaves the council. You've got Desmond Clark, who...
Regurgitate.
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry.
Not yet.
Carry on.
Desmond Clark has, in Nottinghamshire, councillor. He's had to resign as a councillor because of what he describes as a change in personal circumstances, and decided he didn't actually want to be a councillor.
Well, there's a lesson for us all. Don't apply to be a councillor and run for election without first asking yourself, do I want to be a councillor?
There's always a risk when you're on the ballot paper, isn't there, that you might sort of get elected. You've then got, Wayne Titley in Staffordshire, who had to step down after 2 weeks because of controversial posts on Facebook. The reason I highlight that is because, just to demonstrate how important this is, the by-election cost 27 grand. So they're not sort of cheap having these by-elections.
I thought they were going to be saving us money.
Yeah, well, more on that in a moment. There's also Tony Hewitt, James, who I think is my favourite. He had to resign from Ferry Hill Parish Council. He was elected as a Reform member. The reason he's had to resign is that his wife will now no longer be allowed to enter the Ferry Hill Town Council flower competition. She actually has done very well. I was looking at Mrs. Ferryhill's sort of results in the past. In 2023, she came second in the back garden competition and third in the front garden. 2024, she came first place in the front garden competition of Ferryhill Town Council flower.
Congratulations to Mrs. Hewitt.
But she can't enter if he's a councillor for 2025.
Right.
So he's
no longer a councillor.
He's now resigned. So there'll be a
that she can enter the flower competition.
Yeah, so she'll now be able to enter
the front garden competition.
Front garden. Well, I think she's in front and back garden.
Well,
there's three.
Well, that changes everything.
There's three.
I thought this was a silly story when it was just the front garden.
There's three particular gardens that you enter for in Ferryhill Town Parish Council.
Front, back and middle?
I knew I should have written the third one down. It's definitely back, front.
Roof.
No, I think it's like an MVP. Is it roof
Window?
Garden? It's like an MVP, I think. You're sort of most valued. It's sort of overall gardener and helping the community.
Relapse. Relapse
is not one yet.
Okay. Rewind. The crowd say Bo Selector.
That is a very famous song, of course, but no, not yet.
Okay.
In terms of the people who haven't quite... Just to give you a flavour, James, because I know you haven't got time to listen to sort of council meetings at the moment. This is how it's going in Worcestershire County Council.
I understand President Zia, King of the Four Kingdoms and Conqueror of Democracy, has visited Worcestershire and was served a platter of pastries and salad. Now, they made a commitment there was going to be no cost to the council whatsoever for the involvement of Doge in Worcestershire County Council. So I'd just like to ask, has the £144 for that food been repaid, and when?
That's a bit petty, don't you think?
As to being petty, it has been Doge's very clear statement that there will be no cost to the council. So it's quite clear, and I would like an answer to that question. Has that £144 been paid?
Thank you, Councillor Kent. As to the money for any lunch that was provided, do you know how much it cost? And are you having lunch here today?
Yeah.
So goodness knows. Listen, I'm wondering whether or not it's a good idea to make the vetting procedure for these people more lenient as opposed to more strict.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And, of course, they're signing up people from a slightly higher profile politics as well. An awful lot of them seem to be Liz Truss cheerleaders. I couldn't remember Jake Berry, I have to be honest with you. When I heard that Jake Berry was joining Reform, I thought he used to be in EastEnders. But that was a terrible disservice to someone called Nick Berry, who was brilliant. And he, of course, went on, Henry, to star in Heartbeat, which was wonderful. And he had a hit record with Every Loser Wins, which is a lovely... So Jake Berry, I missed this, but then, of course, he was only chairman of the Conservative Party under Liz Truss, so I might just have blinked. So now Farage is signing up lots of Liz Truss cheerleaders.
Yeah, and he's probably the most high profile of which. He was given a knighthood by Boris Johnson for services to...
Frankly, who wasn't?
To political life. On the sort of subject of Liz Truss, he's an enthusiastic supporter. He said a low-tax, high-growth economy, these are the core principles of why we are Conservatives, and I'm delighted Liz Truss has the plan to deliver this. And I mean, there's a whole host of other. I think I've worked out there's 13 ex-Conservative MPs who are now in Reform.
Does it include that fellow who got fired because it turned out he'd dressed up his mate as a Nazi on a stag weekend?
It does. Well, this is Aidan Burley.
That's the fellow.
You may recall.
Was it? No, Sutton Coldfield, Solihull?
Yeah, I think it was...
He's the one that watched the Olympic opening ceremony and had he was quite an early canary down the coal mine, wasn't he, really?
A leftist.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, and
down with the NHS and things.
With the allegation about him, and indeed he was sacked by David Cameron in 2011, was that he was on a stag do and bought the Nazi uniform for the groom to wear when they were at a French ski resort.
Yes. Well, who here hasn't? Actually, that doesn't really work. So, and on we go. Anne Widdecombe, I'd forgotten about her. I'm not sure I'm particularly grateful to you for reminding me. And, of course, the lady who lost the Tory whip for using the N-word, she's been signed up recently.
Anne-Marie Morris is leading the social care policy. Marco Longy, you might recognise his name. He was a sort of Midlands MP. He got in trouble because on a leaflet, he was accused of targeting leaflets to British Pakistani voters because the Labour candidate, now MP, has the surname of Kumar, an Indian surname, and was sort of making the point about standing up in Kashmir. There were calls for him to resign at the time. He didn't, and there's a whole list.
Do you think that the chief whip of Reform UK Limited should get in touch with those people in Worcestershire and explain to them that they don't need to spend £144 on lunch because they could, of course, do it for 30p?
Nice segue. This is, of course, this is Lee Anderson, who I was going to sort of... I mean, there's not really much you can say about Lee Anderson, is there?
Well, you say that.
30p. There's all... I mean, David Jones, the former cabinet minister, joined this week. Pretty uncontroversial. He did get told off in 2013 when he used taxpayers' money to drive a chauffeur-driven Jaguar. I suppose he wasn't driving, but in a chauffeur-driven Jaguar for a 100-metre journey at taxpayer expense.
Here we go. And, of course, they are now diluting the vetting process in order to ensure that these people end up looking like the creme de la creme of the Reform UK personnel. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
It's 12:02.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 5 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Coming up at 12:30, I will play you in full my rather longer than usual for this programme, interview with Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur in the occupied Palestinian territories. And I'll briefly tell you why. It is because that thing that we said would happen has happened. All of the people that were queuing up to condemn anybody calling for compassion in Gaza, anti-Semitic or supporters of Hamas. Do you remember that, when you couldn't turn up to a peace march without being called a supporter of Hamas by people like Suella Braverman? They've all gone completely silent because they know that what they were defending has become completely indefensible. And it means that the public discourse has been silenced. Did you know, for example, that 15 people were killed by an Israeli strike as they queued outside a medical point in Gaza yesterday? Well, of course you didn't. Who's going to tell you when they could be talking about Glastonbury and Bob Villan instead? Look at that. You see that outpouring. Did you notice that? That absolute explosion of commentary about the Middle East when a musical artist called for death to IDF soldiers from the stage at Glastonbury, and all of these people who are not, they just can't talk about it because they'd have to admit their complicity in some ways in these continuing atrocities, up to and including genocide now for many commentators and legal experts, crucially. And indeed the United Nations Special Rapporteur to the occupied territories. They can't talk about it, because to do so would be to say, crikey, yeah, we may have got this a little bit wrong. So that's why it's not getting reported at all. 15 people killed queuing for aid in Gaza yesterday by an Israeli strike. I suppose we can all agree that the IDF is incredibly careful not to target civilians or hurt civilians when they're going after Hamas terrorists, which makes it somewhat unlikely that 10 of those people were children. 10 dead children. Yesterday. I think 82 people died in total, but the newsworthy among them are the 15 that were actually queuing up at a medical point in central Gaza. Families waiting for nutritional supplements and medical treatments. This is from medical sources. Project Hope, which ran the facility, said operations at the clinic had been suspended until further notice. If they wipe out all of the medical infrastructure, which they have pretty much done, then they will not. People will not be able to go back. And I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it now, and I'm not the first, and I won't be the last, but that's the plan. And when the plan comes to fruition, and we sit here going, I told you so, it won't matter a jot, because it will be too late. But hey-ho, down with Bob Villain, eh? Let's get back to the conversation about conversations. There you go, that's gone meta. That's the ultimate JOB phone-in, isn't it? A conversation about conversations. It can't be a conversation if you don't let anybody else join in, James. Okay, well then I will, because I'm interested in talking cures and therapy, and I'm interested in scepticism, and I'm interested in ways you could reach, I don't know why I'm thinking mostly of men, but I am, reach the men who would benefit from it enormously, but don't, and I promise you I used to be one of them, the men who are the least likely to sign up for it, but who would be the biggest beneficiaries of it. How do we reach them? Jessica's on the Wirral. Jessica, what made you pick up the phone?
It's just my husband, really, and the experiences he's had.
Go on.
He was in the army when he was 18, and I met him then.
Yeah.
His first tour of Afghan when he was 19. And obviously I encouraged him to leave after the 5 years that you have to do.
Yeah.
And he did have PTSD, but I think we just kind of thought it would be okay and just kind of carried on.
Yeah.
And then my daughter was killed one day walking to school by a van driver who monstered the pavement.
I'm so sorry.
So since then, he's just struggled so much. Yeah, he wouldn't speak, or he wouldn't have therapy at the beginning.
God, did you?
Yeah, I did for 18 months. Yeah.
And it helped a bit.
Yeah, and I just give up work. But obviously, he wasn't able to do that. He went on 200 milligrams of sertraline, and
so he'll talk to the doctor then.
Yeah, not really. He won't open up.
He'll just take the prescription and go home.
Yeah. He did do combat stress twice.
Yes.
For about 6 weeks, but he admits now that he didn't actually make full use of it, and basically.
You're worried about him, aren't you?
Yeah. He stopped the sertraline on his own now.
Right.
And we've gone back to doctors, but I just don't know what else to do.
And what does he say when you say to him, let's try therapy?
I think he will, but he's kind of missed about a bit. We had specialised a therapist with someone that deals with road collisions, and he missed that.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's the NHS, but he doesn't really want to do that.
Why not? Why not?
I think he thinks they don't understand the whole army thing.
I mean, what do you say? What do you say to him? Because, you know, you don't know until you've tried, do you?
Yeah. No, and I've said this to him.
I know you have.
But he just won't open up. I think it's the way the army get you to be, and I understand it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a panacea, it's not a magic, but it does.
In Afghan, I understand that.
More often. Is there a macho thing going on here as well, Jessica?
Yeah, definitely.
How do we deal with that? How do you help someone understand that it's not unmacho or unmasculine to talk about?
If you cry, it's, you know, you're being a girl, it's all of that with him.
But crikey, he's been through it. I mean, that's an almost unbearable burden that he's carrying, and he's trying to carry it all on his own.
Yeah.
Does he open up to you?
Not really. I have to drag it out of him.
God.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, and you know that doesn't happen to me very often. I mean, you make us realise how important it is to carry on with this attempt to work to find ways that you can get through to someone. He's absolutely adamant he's the last man on earth that would need or benefit from therapy, and he's probably one of the first.
Yeah, like, I think he sees, you know, you've got to be tough and you can't let things get to you, but it's not real.
He's been let down a bit by the army, I think. Is that fair to say or not? Was it, I mean...
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, they did help him get a new job when he left,
okay.
But I think it was just the timing of when he went, and his tours were quite far, I think.
Yeah, and then to come home and endure the most unimaginable thing a parent can endure like that. I mean, I don't know what to say to you, and I'm going to run out of time. In not this call, you can stay for as long as you want, but in this part of the week's show, this part of the conversation, if anyone has got any idea about what I mean, you really need someone like Del up in Edinburgh, the first caller in the last hour, who's been through it, who can show the way. But of course, if your fella's not exposing himself to those conversations, he's never going to hear those voices, is he? The people that can say, look, I've been through it as well. That's what he needs, I think, isn't it? It's not going to, it's no good. It's no good me saying, oh, I've been to therapy and I thought it was wonderful, because he's going to say, you've not seen anything that I've seen. You don't know. He kind of needs to hear from someone who's been to hell and back like he has.
I think that's what he said. The NHS one, they won't understand.
Yeah. There'll be people there that do, but he needs to speak to people on the other side of the consultancy table, doesn't he? He needs to speak to people who have had help and who would previously have been the kind of people who thought that that men like them never needed help. I crikey. And he's been to combat stress, who are usually one of the first stop-off points. SAFA, SSAFA, is supposed to be quite powerful in this area as well, but unless somebody wants help, they're never going to get it. What are you going to do? Yeah. What are you going to do? Just carry on chipping away? Or
we've gone back to the doctors, but I don't really know what else to do now.
Well, if anyone has got any ideas, whether they submit them to me privately or whether they ring in the next 20 minutes or so, I'll make sure it reaches you, Jessica. I really will, but I'm sorry I can't be more helpful. I really am. Except, add my voice to the voices that say that I know that the men who think that they are the last men on earth who would benefit from therapy are usually the first. And listen, I've got, as I thought I would, I've got a couple of people who are in your part of the world and are qualified to help, asking me to put them in touch with you. So I may do that as well if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
And then have a chat with them and see what happens. One or two, perhaps. But I'm sorry. I mean, that is awful, and I can't believe what you've both gone through. I mean, hell for you, but with the military trauma as well, and then being compounded by the loss of your daughter, that is just absolutely unthinkable. Truly unthinkable. Take care, Jessica. It's 12:16.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 12. You just don't know which direction conversations are going to go in, and this has gone in a slightly unexpected one, and I don't want to say a welcome one, because I wish that the things that we're talking about had never happened. But it's not the conversation we were going to have. That was going to be about the dangers, if you like, of a narrative of sick note culture. Perhaps inevitably, it's a conversation about people who really need help, as opposed to the political narrative of people who are just pretending that they need help, somehow defining the coverage of sickness and disability benefits. That therapy and talking cures, though, trust me on this. If you trust me on anything ever, if we could extend proper therapy to as many corners of the country as possible, it would be so transformative of so many perceived problems and, of course, so many lives. But how do you persuade someone like Jessica's husband that he would benefit from it? I don't know, but you might. Sean's in Bristol. Sean, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Like Dale, I'm also a neurodivergent veteran, so trying to organise what I want to say in my head is a bit difficult right now. But
you take all the time you want, mate. All right.
Thank you. I just want to send him some hugs, actually, because he's obviously doing amazing with his rock climbing and stuff. So
yes,
yeah.
Me too. Soldiers need hugs.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I also worked in harm reduction as a drugs worker for over a decade, and would often talk to people on a one-to-one basis around talking therapy, and often they would be sceptical about that. And after about 20 minutes of chatting and listening, using counselling skills, I would then say, "So, how do you feel now? Has that been beneficial to you, us talking?" And they would invariably always say yes. Mm-hmm. And there lies your answer. You know, just talk to people who are sceptical, invite them to offload their scepticism, and then ask them how they feel. And you know, talking therapy is that. You will know that. You're able to offload stuff in a safe environment.
And work things out, really, almost sort of as a side effect of it all. It just things you feel things slotting into place, and sometimes even you see stuff on the mugs and T-shirts, and you think it's glib, but a problem shared is a problem halved. Is a cliche for a reason. Yeah. Sometimes just not bottling it up anymore is enormously beneficial, isn't it?
It's not rocket science, right? I think what's important is as a society, we need to learn how to listen, active listening, reflective listening, not judging and just observing.
But how do you reach the person who doesn't think he needs to be listened to, or doesn't think he wants to be listened to?
I don't think he will be able to separate that and going on a rant or an offload for 10, 15 minutes and then, allow that space, allow that to happen, and then just say, how do you feel? Was that last 10 minutes beneficial to you?
But you've got to get them sitting down in front of you first, haven't you?
I don't know. I think that could be.
Well, you've got to have them engaged in the conversation before they can go off on the rant.
Yeah.
I think. I'll tell you what. He's not going to sell many ice creams going at that speed, is he? That's a Morecambe and Wise joke, which I don't think you got, Sean. It's the siren.
I totally. As you said it, I was looking at it going up Park Street in Bristol.
Pathetic, really.
No.
Pathetic.
Hey, that's why we love you, James. That's one of the reasons why we love you.
So if Jessica will be listening, and if we could think, because I think losing a child on top of the military-related trauma puts her husband into a category that we can't even, I can't even begin to imagine. And if you had to find a way of tempting him into a space where he could start to offload, I don't know how you'd do it. I just don't know how you'd do it.
I think very gently using the core conditions, if you can remember those, of person-centered, of empathy, congruence, unconditional positive regard, and just allow that person just to talk at their own pace. Informally, and then ask gently, was that beneficial?
You're a good man, Sean.
Yeah.
And you've seen the results. That's the other point. You know it works.
It's in my experience, it has worked. Not always, perhaps, but it's residual, isn't it? You just got to keep persevering. And I think that's the key, is just people will have therapy when they're ready.
And that is the problem with any recovery, any rehabilitation, is that people have to be ready for it and have to want it. And sometimes you don't know how to help people hurry or increase their pace to that space. Sean, thank you. Some extraordinary calls today and some extraordinary messages, which I never have as much time to read out as I would like. Here's one from Carol. I was just listening to your last caller, talking about Jessica on the Wirral. Has broken me. I was her 10 years ago. We didn't lose a child, but my husband had a really bad accident at work. He lost a thumb as a consequence, and due to the accident he had to have CBT, that's cognitive behavioural therapy, and it was only then that he began to deal with the PTSD from his military service. He's also autistic. My husband is now doing amazingly. He's a different man. His therapist wasn't a specialist, but it still worked, so I just want to give her hope and wish her well. I'm out the other side, but I had a breakdown when he recovered. Because the body keeps the score, Carol. So what you're carrying as you love someone who is struggling and suffering is immeasurable. And then they get better and suddenly it's like someone's taken the lid or someone's knocked the lid off a pressure cooker and you then... Oh, boy. I hope she is looking after her own mental health and not just looking after everyone else like I did. I'm through it now as well, but I really hope the caller will be in my position very soon. I think we all do. Well, I know we all do. And a few contacts and a few suggestions coming in, and we'll pass them all on. But obviously, you just want to be able to do more, don't you? James is in Leighton. James, what made you pick up the phone?
I think it's I'm going from a success story from talking therapy, because about 14 years ago, it was soon after my son was probably about 5 months old. I was under a lot of stress at work. They were actively trying to sack me. Essentially, sure. There was a new MD, and he was trying to sort of clean house, I guess. And I got to the point where I was just completely overwhelmed. It's just like... it doesn't matter what it is, does it? Because, I mean, you probably are like me. You're sort of thinking, well, all right, we had our problems, but we didn't go to war and lose a child, exactly. So how dare we... But it doesn't matter what the source of the trauma is or the source of the upset. Yeah, I was waking up in the morning being sick. I mean, suicidal ideations, I don't care if it got to that point, but certainly standing on the Tube platform, I sort of did the pros and cons a couple of times, and that's when
Lord.
Made me sort of go to, that was just what made me really go. And I didn't want to get signed off sick because I felt like I'd end up losing my job because they were sort of actively trying to get rid of me anyway. And I just didn't like the idea of antidepressants because I felt it was like a sticking plaster rather than... I know they work for a lot of people.
They do. They have their purpose, of course.
And the doctor, when he said I can sign you up, and I said, I can't. And I said, he goes, I can give you antidepressants. I said, I'd really rather not. And he said, I think that's good. And he gave me a course. It was like an online course called Beating the Blues. It was like a 12-week DBT course. Yeah. So I did it online. And there was like video showing examples of people who've gone through grief or redundancy and all different types of problems. And then I had a once a week call with someone to sort of go through it. And I mean, if I hadn't had that, he just did it straight away and said, like, I'll get you signed up for this. If I hadn't had that, I think my life would have been a very, very different place. But I think the key thing about it, and I guess this is twofold from the sort of the cost of it. I could have got signed off. I probably would have eventually ended up losing my job. That was the way things were helping, and it's certainly like I wasn't being a good husband or parent at the time. And but the sort of skills that it gave me, because it's not about being happy. It's about giving you the tools to sort of look at what's real in your thoughts and what's not. Yeah. And it's because if anyone's done CBT, it's all about sort of going, this is sort of disordered thinking. It's just like these aren't real, these thoughts you're having, and that's what a lot of depression is. And from then, I've gone on to be I ended up being very successful in that company. I got promoted many times and won awards and stuff. But it's like, and ever since then, when I have had difficult parts in my life, it's like...
if you were a machine, you'd do maintenance, wouldn't you? You'd look after yourself. You'd change parts. You'd do oil bits. I'm not being crass. It is that simple sometimes. And I'm glad that you've come out the other side. And I hope some of the people getting in touch with me are learning from what you are telling them. James is in Brittany. James, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, the first thing that made me want to talk to you is to say to you personally, a massive thank you, because I did start therapy about 18 months ago, directly as a result of listening to you talking to your experiences of boarding school and your own journey that you've opened about. It was just something that struck me, and I think the way that what I really wanted to say is, for so long, I thought, well, there are people much worse off than me.
Yes.
And listening to some of the stories today, that very much comes out. But we are all worthy of being the best that we can be, and it has been life changing for me. It's a journey that I'm still on, and don't even know if there's an arrival point, but that's okay.
That's a lovely way of putting it. If you think you're the best possible version of yourself, then don't go. Actually, no. Right. If you think you're the best possible version of yourself, then you probably should be absolutely frog marched down to the therapist, shouldn't you?
Yeah. But it was particularly, the stuff on boarding school syndrome, and people that you've interviewed as well on full disclosure, several of those, and it just chimed with me.
Oh, that's lovely to hear.
And it led to very specific changes. I've ended a relationship that I realised wasn't the right relationship for me. I decided to leave France and go back to England because that's where my home. I think I didn't have a sense of home, really, and now it's clear that I do have a home, and I'm not there. I'm somewhere else.
This is extraordinary, isn't it? And that sense that you've fallen into patterns of behaviour that were not doing you any good at all, but you didn't realise there was any alternative.
Yeah, patterns created when I was 9 and 10.
Yeah, same.
And now I look at it now, and it's just so blooming obvious. It's so obvious, but you can only get that when you are talking to someone who has those skills.
And that's what we need to find for Jessica's husband, really. So we've got this shared experience in our past, and somehow I managed to articulate it in a way that reached you. And it was always better late than never, isn't it? It doesn't matter that we wish someone had done it when we were 25. It might not have worked back then, but we need to find someone that can reach Jessica's husband in the same way. Should we hug it out, James?
Yeah. Indeed.
There we go. Indeed. That's a lovely thing to hear, honestly. If I hadn't already been so emotionally battered by Jessica's call, then you'd have tipped me over the edge. God bless, mate, and thank you for letting me know. 12:30 is the time. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. I love coming into the studio for for all of our callers, but for some in particular. Complete change of pace now. Francesca Albanese is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Territories, and she's just published a report called From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. And the word genocide is in quotes in some of the news articles reporting on this report, but it's not in quotes in the report itself. And of course, it remains a term that some people object to. That's why I began this interview by asking her about precisely that point, the fact that the use of the word genocide is considered very, very controversial in some quarters when talking about what Israel is doing in Gaza, but not, apparently, by her. The report, Francesca Albanese, is called From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. There's no quotes, there's no quotation marks there. The use of the word genocide is still considered controversial in some quarters, unqualified use of the word genocide, but not by you.
I wouldn't say that I'm the only one who has concluded that Israel has committed acts of genocide. And by the way, as a UN Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, I am mandated by the United Nations to investigate, document the violations of international law committed primarily by Israel in the Occupied Palestinian Territory and report to the United Nations. So by the time I wrote the first report, Anatomy of a Genocide, in March 2024, already 2 dozens of special rapporteurs, independent human rights experts of the United Nations, had reached the same conclusion. There was a genocide unfolding. And by now, I'm definitely not the only one. Actually, there is an increasing consensus among genocide scholars, genocide historians, including Israeli historians. But in the United Nations, I'm definitely not the only one, because there is the Commission of Inquiry on Israel and Palestine appointed by the Human Rights Council, which before summer. In its last report of 2024 concluded that Israel had committed acts of genocide of imposing measures calculated to prevent birth, and it has continued to document genocidal practices and intent. And so the Committee on Israeli Practices, which is a political body. I mean, they are UN ambassadors based in Geneva. They have concluded that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid and genocide. So definitely not the only one. I would like people to understand what is genocide. This is not a political statement. It's a legal assessment based on the fact. If there is an intent to destroy a group as such, through acts of killing, creation of conditions calculated to destroy, or infliction of severe bodily or mental harm, or measures calculated to prevent birth or subtraction of children, which is the only genocidal act that has not been investigated by me or others so far. Even Amnesty International and an increasing number of civil society groups are saying it's genocide. And frankly, coming from the United Nations, from the Human Rights Council, I registered that there is an increasing consensus among diplomats that there is no other way to call it than genocide, because Israel is targeting Palestinians as such. It doesn't matter if they are young or old, if they are doctors or if they are nurses or other civil servants. They're all targeted and all killable, all destroyable. And look at what Gaza has been turned to. These are conditions calculated to destroy.
It is. I wanted to clarify that, because to apply the word to Israel's actions in Gaza is one thing. To apply it to companies, to the complicity of companies that are household names that most people listening to this now will be clients of, or customers of, or users of some of the software, some of the technology. It's it's designed, the report, to land with individuals as much as it is with institutions, so that people will question. I mean, are you accusing customers of complicity?
Look, first of all, again, as a special rapporteur, I have to investigate and state facts and their qualification under international law. I'm not supposed to please, I'm not supposed to accuse, but I'm sharing my findings. And I've not accused anyone in particular. I've exposed that there has been for a long time, for decades, an economy of occupation, meaning private actors enabling or driving or enmeshed with what Israel has made in what remains of Palestine, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which means displacing the Palestinians and replacing them. So displacing Palestinians and replacing them with settlers, with colonies, with companies producing goods and services, and or developing a tourism industry in the occupied land. This is unlawful. It's unlawful under international humanitarian law, is unlawful under human rights law, is unlawful under the UN Charter. So I could have written this report already years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because the economy of occupation has been established. And, for example, arms manufacturers or companies producing bulldozers and other machinery used to destroy and build infrastructure, water and electricity grids or rails and roads. These have profited from an unlawful endeavor. However, in the last 20 months, instead of pulling out in the face of legal developments like genocide proceedings before the ICJ declaring the occupation other than by name an act of aggression, enabling racial segregation and apartheid. Instead of pulling out, they have maintained their commitment and their engagement. And many of them, with knowledge, intent, and purpose, have provided the means for this economy to turn genocidal. What I mean, for example, arms manufacturers have continued to provide weapons, intelligence, technology for Israel to make its weaponry more and more sophisticated and lethal, while costing less and less in terms of risk and life for the Israeli army. Think of the unmanned technology, military technology that has been deployed in Gaza. Think of the F-35 flying in beast mode. Think of the unmanned technology of the quadcopters used to kill people in Gaza or to maim people in Gaza, especially children. Think of the Volvo and Hyundai machinery that has already, and these companies have been put on notice for decades, that they were part of an unlawful endeavor because they've been used by Israel to uproot Palestinian orchards and trees, or to demolish Palestinian homes in the West Bank. Well, they've been now used in Gaza to pulverize homes, the remnants of homes and buildings.
It's an extension of impunity from government to commerce. I might be misreading you slightly. Are you surprised that the recent events in Gaza haven't focused the minds or the energies of the companies that you report on more? Because, as you say, it's been going on for decades, but that recent events in Gaza haven't acted as any sort of catalyst to change.
Yeah,
I am reading you right.
No, you're reading me right. I mean, I've been shocked. I've engaged in very troubling investigations especially since I became a special rapporteur. I've operated in other conflict areas, conflict scenarios. This is something completely different what I've seen as a special rapporteur in the past 3 years. But this investigation has been particularly painful because, there are human beings making decisions. For example, when the CEO of Palantir is asked in a public meeting, but why are you providing Israel with this technology? You know that this is used to kill Palestinians. My family has been killed like that, and you're killing Palestinians. And he says, yes, most probably terrorists. Now, this statement has been made after months and months of genocidal assault, when the genocidal proceedings were ongoing, where criminal proceedings against Israeli leaders were ongoing. And so this is why I say this man has assumed ideologically that Israel was killing terrorists when the statistics were already reporting, and had been reporting from the beginning, that 70% of the victims were women and children. So who are the terrorists that the CEO of Palantir thinks Israel was killing? How does it justify the killing of 70% of the Gaza victims as being women and children? And
I don't know if this is unduly speculative when you talk about him adopting an ideology or believing an ideology. I mean, in commercial terms, they don't have to, do they? They can simply deploy the same cover that Israel has deployed. So Israel's rationale, even with 180,000 Palestinians now killed or injured, Netanyahu's rationale remains, oh no, we take enormous pains not to harm civilians. We are going after terrorists, which many people would say you can see from space that that's not true. But if there are huge sums of money to be made in Gaza and the West Bank, then that provides you with the camouflage that you need to keep doing business.
Absolutely. Camouflage is the term that I've used in my Anatomy of a Genocide report, which is a report that took provided an X-ray of what Israel had been done militarily in Gaza for 5 months, in Gaza and in Gaza alone. And I warned in the international community in March 2024, if this operation goes unpunished, Israel will have been allowed to commit humanitarian camouflage, meaning to capsize, to distort categories of international humanitarian law like evacuation order to justify forced displacement of millions of people, safe zones that have been turned into trap zones or death traps, in fact, or killing civilians, then calling them collateral damage or human shields. This is humanitarian camouflage, and 6 months later, Israel has used the same script to justify an assault on Lebanese civilians, meaning starting military operations without any precautions, distinctions, or any protection of the civilian populations. And this is becoming the new normal. James, it's very disconcerting.
And it's very incremental. I don't know if you came across this when you were studying at SOAS, but we have a figure of speech, boiling a frog. So you turn the temperature up so slowly that the frog doesn't realise until it's too late that it's died. And that seems to me to be what we've been watching for the last nearly 2 years. It's happened incrementally, so there's no point at which the thing you thought might happen would have happened, at which point companies throw their arms up in the air and say, we want nothing more to do with this. Customers are not receiving the information they need to know what they are, by association, helping to support or aiding the complicity. There's no real pivot point.
Yeah. I didn't know this expression of the frog in boiling water,
it's
but
not
I don't
a very
think,
nice one.
No, but it's quite vivid and graphic, yes. And I don't think that we are watching. We are living through this. Yes. This is happening to us because, again, look. I mean, I keep on engaging also with people in Italy, but I don't think it would be that different from the British the British people in this country. We are facing our governments escaping engagement with the public. There are masses of people taking the streets and challenges the government. We have people, including in companies, not wanting this anymore. People in Microsoft and in Google working for these companies have been the first to raise the alarm about what was happening. So again, there is a push from within the system to change it. There have been people taking the street challenging both the UK and Italian government for their continuous supplying weapons and maintaining trade agreements with the State of Israel. However, we keep on seeing a rush to rearm, 5% of the domestic expenditure going into weaponry, while people are needing and asking and are suffering from the cuts in education and health and other essential services. So this is where I think we are the frog in the boiling water.
That is the first part of my interview with Francesca Albanese, the United Nations. Well, for the benefit of John in Coulsdon, who's saying, why don't you press her on who's funding her? I've got two answers. The first is it was recorded earlier this week, John. And the second is I don't need to, because the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territories, there's a clue, John, in the title. But anyway, you can hear the second part after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
49 is the time. I didn't want to tell you before you started listening to this interview, but since we recorded it, Donald Trump's administration has issued sanctions, or announced that it will be sanctioning Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Marco Rubio writing, that's the Secretary of State, Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel will no longer be tolerated. We will always stand by our partners in their right to self-defense. The United States mission to the United Nations has also issued a statement calling for her to be removed for, and I quote, a years-long pattern of virulent anti-Semitism and unrelenting anti-Israel bias. They describe the accusations of genocide and or apartheid as, quotes, false and offensive, end quotes. She knows the risks she takes when she does work like this. And the second part of this interview begins with Francesca Albanese making an illuminating observation about just how lucrative it can be to be involved in the actions that her latest report is about. The idea that the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has risen by 179% since the assaults upon Gaza began. And that proves your point perfectly. I think.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is something that I have realized very recently when really doing the maths, because I didn't need that. I didn't need that to know that what companies have been doing is wrong, because again, I'm not an economist. I'm just looking at facts from a legal perspective, and companies have a responsibility not to engage, not to be directly linked, not to enable, not to facilitate violations of human rights, all the more when they amount to depriving people of their right of self-determination. And here you have companies, but even the pension fund of Norway, a country which is seen as pro-Palestine, and I hate this terminology, pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, because this is not a football match, for God's sake. This is people's life. And if anyone thinks that the Israelis are thriving in this moment, look at the statistics of how many young Israelis are committing suicide for what they have been doing in the Gaza Strip. This is a breaking point for the Israeli society as well. And when you think that the Norwegian pension funds invest 121 billions in 45 companies that I've investigated, which are a small number, because again, my report is not that contains a list of companies. It's not a duplicate of the database that the UN maintains. It's just the exposure of a system where the companies I mentioned are illustrative across the spectrums, from arms manufacturers to even charities, and again, pension funds and universities, banks. Everyone has been lending legitimacy and normalizing the abnormal. And even the Norwegian pension fund cannot divest from this unlawful endeavor. This is the situation we live in today, and it must change, and will not change without people knowing. Because if Palestine was a crime scene, it would hold the fingerprints of all of us. And this is why it's not about everyone is now can be brought before a court. No, but everyone has the power, for example, as workers, as buyers, as shareholders, has the power to correct and to make this process less engaged in criminal activities.
I understand, and I appreciate you don't provide definitive lists in the report, just illustrative examples, some of which people would expect. For example, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, II, and you've mentioned Palantir, but other companies people perhaps wouldn't expect to see: Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Airbnb, Booking.com, Chevron, BP, Caterpillar, and Volvo. I mean, to expect the public to take some of these companies out of their lives would be like asking them to take the eggs out of a baked cake.
Yeah. No, but this is why, I mean, this is like when, if you are someone concerned for the environment, you know that in the society and in the, let me say, in the consumerist society we live in, you cannot get rid of plastic. I mean, you can get as close to zero waste as possible, while you will still produce waste. And still, the point here is to make the change you can in your life based on who you are. And if you are, I've been engaging with bankers and asset managers. I didn't even know what these people were doing until 4 or 5 months ago. And there is an increasing number of people reaching out to me. I mean, just a couple of days ago, I had a meeting with bankers and asset managers, both public and private in Switzerland and in other places. And they're asking for guidance. They really would like to do the right thing, and they don't know how, because the system itself has prevented them from knowing the complexity. So for many people, Palestine is this debate about the two-state solution. Is this two people in bracket not getting along and fighting among each other? It's not that. Israel has maintained an unlawful occupation which has become a vehicle has been used as a vehicle to take Palestinian land and resources. And this is structural violence that, of course, has produced violence in return. And I know that the 7th of October has been extremely violent. Crimes have been committed. But what has been, again, never a form of injustice justifies other injustices. And this applies to the Palestinians on October 7th for all what they've suffered and the Israelis since. However, an unlawful act of a people who strives for their self-determination cannot be compared to an unlawful act of an occupation which is unlawful in and of itself and must withdraw with its troops and its settlements and its businesses and its profits.
We don't have much time, but I'm interested in the parameters of public morality are not set by businesses, are they? They're set by governments, or they're set by organisations, ideally like the United Nations or the International Criminal Court. Well, by lawyers.
I'm not an expert on morality, but the parameters of legality...
Where law and morality meet. And
ethics. Ethics.
Yes.
Yes.
And if Israel's history of completely ignoring international law is now essentially proved contagious to commerce.
Oof. I'm glad you said that, because I think this is the case.
It was more of a question than a statement.
I think it's pretty correct. I don't think that it's really Israel. What I've realized through these 3 years is that somewhat Israel is a byproduct of an unhealed trauma and the manipulation of interests connected to this. Because one thing is sure, and I say that as a European who's aware of what we have done for centuries to the Jewish people. After the Holocaust, and it's true that there was a settler colonial project that had started toward Palestine, helped by the Brits. From a the Zionist project was a settler colonial project. But however, the Jewish people who survived the Holocaust had really no place where to go. However, what has happened over time is that their fear and their trauma has been manipulated, and there has been an active indoctrination of the Israelis. I do see the Israeli young people who are completely confused. They know that what they are doing in Gaza is wrong, and at the same time, they cannot make sense of betraying. They cannot envisage the possibility of betraying the IDF, because the IDF is who they are. They don't want to be traitors. And this is what has shaped their morality. And so there is so much manipulation and instrumentalization from Western countries of Israel.
Dissonance as well.
There is
cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, but Western countries, the United States first and foremost, and I wouldn't even say the United States, but there is an ideological component, and it's Christian Zionist and other. there is always a richness of people who indulge in their racism, who have recognized themselves as have recognized an affinity with this Israeli government. This has produced a reality where ethics has gone lost.
Yes.
And the path of law has also gone lost. We need to push back on this lawlessness, James. Now it's the turning point. Palestine can be the defining moment in history where we get to awakening and we change course. Because if we continue to persist in dismantling international law, in dismantling human rights, both at domestic level and internationally, we will all have something to lose in this.
Dan, there is a tiny bit more of that interview that you'll be able to hear on the LBC website, but we are out of time. Francesca Albanese there, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories. And as I mentioned earlier, perhaps you would say as night follows day, she has been accused of both anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment by Donald Trump's administration, where Benjamin Netanyahu, currently, of course, wanted by the International Criminal Court on war crimes charges, has recently been visiting. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinions, put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.